Ba-ba-da-ba-ba-da. Joe, you've managed to chase everyone out of the mumble room.
So it would seem.
Yeah. You must have been...
Did you want me to come in via mumble, or should I do source connect?
Yeah, I think this is fine. Should be fine. There's Brent. Hello, Brent. Oh, my situation is...
as well, anyway.
My situation is declining quickly for about the last half hour.
Not feeling so good.
No. Fuck. Yeah, last half hour has gotten pretty bad. Now it's starting
You're
to
going to make it?
I don't know. We'll see. This day I'll probably have to get away for a little bit and come back. So, I'll get the music. So the music will be up loud for a little bit while I go take care of myself. And then,
Okay.
Yeah, we'll see. So, yeah, I'll be back in a bit. bop. Bop. Bop, 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 bop. Oh, hello, guys.
What's up, man?
Oh, you
Hello.
know, Linux stuff. What are you up to?
Trying to get Cassidy in this chat room.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Having trouble
First day
connecting
today,
though.
right?
Was today the first day, or I thought it was? a couple-
Yesterday was his
Yeah.
first day.
Ah, right. I must have seen a post that was from yesterday then.
Whew, I'm warm.
Is there somebody that can help him connect? I think he's having like certificate problems or something.
You know, if he's having certificate problems, he can probably just. There's a wizard to just regenerate the certificate. That's pretty common. We'll go. Hello, Mr. West.
I guess he doesn't knows Mumble enough to give him a hand.
I can turn that on for a sec if you want.
Nah.
Not enough time.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, it's another lovely day in Washington.
I think we're just being cold smoked. So
Yeah.
by September, we're going to be delicious and ready for consumption.
You know, Mumble is such a pain in the ass for so many people. Like, we don't realize it because we're in a bubble because, you know, we just launch it and use it every day. But
Right. Once you've got it set up,
Yeah.
it's fine.
But I mean, you know, from just experience doing the show, like, it's a constant source of, like, sometimes we just don't have a guest because they can't get Mumble working.
Yeah, multiple times.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, the music's coming in pretty loud for me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we can hardly understand you.
God damn it, Noah.
Is there any way we can just sort of kidnap him?
Yeah, right.
Just don't get off the stream before his show until he fixes it.
I know, right? I just won't hand over Ask Noah until it's fixed. That'll do it. Fucking Mumble. I think out of all the software I use, that's the one I despise the most, but also like the most. It's like this weird.
It does a lot of things right.
Yeah,
I mean, it has
yeah.
a lot going for it.
Yeah, and when it's all set up, and once it's everybody in the clubhouse who knows how to get to the clubhouse, it's fine for. But if you've never been in the clubhouse before, it's very confusing.
Sounds like we're only getting Wes through your mic, Chris.
Nope, that's also an audio issue.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Quiet
Yeah.
West syndrome.
Yep. So when we added a system to bring Brent in for every episode, and when we did that,
I'm sorry.
yeah, it's totally your
You
fault. Brent.
troublemaker.
When Noah made that change, it somehow, and we don't actually know why, something changed, and yeah, so that's been an ongoing issue for weeks that I just haven't been able to resolve, and Noah hasn't been able to resolve because he's busy.
Are you trying to say
I
hashtag
imagine
blame Noah?
Booting me.
Well, actually, it doesn't have turning off Source Connect for you or anything wouldn't fix it now. It's broken now. So
Yeah, that's what I mean. There was some major changes, right? Or at least tiny changes to the infrastructure, and so it's not really me. That's
No.
what I'm trying to
no,
rescue.
no, it's not. No, I just mean when we added that machine, it caused that problem, and it's it has
Well,
not-
Wes, if you want to come over here for the episode,
You know, we might
that
just
might
have
work.
to set that up.
it might take a little bit.
Yeah, a little planning. A little.
Hello, Wimpy.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Yep, very well, thanks. Bit
Good.
tired out, you know,
I
odd
bet.
camp all weekend,
Yeah.
all that sort of thing.
Having too much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, on camp and then a show till 3 o'clock in the morning yesterday. Oh no, that was me.
Oh.
Ooh.
Hey, look, Joe, some of us took early nights whilst we were at odd camp, and some of us didn't turn up till 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the Saturday and the Sunday.
Yeah, and some of us had a show to do on Sunday as well.
Ouch. It's true.
Well, time management, Joe, it's all on you.
Should really rename it Easy Middle of the Day Linux.
Yeah. Got a good sweat going in the studio today. Good sweat going.
Yeah, we just figured we'd move to a sauna
Yeah.
and just
Yeah.
embrace it.
And yeah, turn on the heat. Oh, Cassidy made it? Where is he? Oh, I see up there in the joint queue. Cool. Right on.
Joining on up.
Do 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 do. All right. Well,
Did Thomas make it?
not that I've seen.
Colomar.
Hey Citizen probably can't hear me right now, but does Hey Citizen know he's coming?
Yeah, well, Colomar is Thomas. I think he's German. I'm not sure, but yeah, top of the list there on air. He should be with us.
Oh, is he? Oh, good. Good.
Greetings.
Wie geht's?
Good.
Good.
Thomas, where are you at right now?
Sorry,
Where are you at right now? What's your location?
I'm in Wolfsburg, Germany.
Well, good to have you.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Ooh, warm.
I have to visit Wolfsburg once because it's a very interesting city. It was built after the Second War. Because no, it was built during the Second War because Hitler placed the Volkswagen enterprise there. It's a very interesting city.
Yeah, exactly. The whole city is basically Volkswagen.
And they changed the name after the Second World War, I think, right?
Well, I don't know. I don't live here actually. I'm only here at the moment, so I don't know that much about the city.
Okay. I'm from Switzerland, so it wouldn't be that far.
Oh, okay.
Hello, Cassidy.
Hello.
Nice to have you.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
All right, let's get started. We're gonna jump right in. This is gonna be a tight one today. Let's get going. Let's get rolling. And Thomas, what's your Twitter handle? Do you have a Twitter handle?
No, I don't.
Okay. Do you have a blog or something you'd like us to link to in the show notes?
Yeah, I do have a blog.
What's that URL?
I'll copy it.
Okay. Yeah, if you want to put it if you're in the IRC chat or something too, that'd be fine. Okie dokie. Let's get this going. Stand by, guys. We're going to do just a little quick silence capture here in the studios.
So, a quick question: am I just in the mumble room, or what? Am I doing a my name is Joe?
Well, yeah. No, I think you probably because I have the mumble room muted during the intro. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll just be.
Yeah.
Just
throw
it to me whenever. Yeah. Cool.
Okay. All right. Moment of silence. I'm hearing a little something, but I don't know.
I am too.
Whew, I am warm. Okay. All right.
This is BSD Unplugged, episode 34.
All right.
It just never gets old.
No, I love it. I can't help it. I love it. All right, Brent, are you ready over on your end? I'm going to take that silence as a total yes. That's what I'm going to take that silence as.
Yeah. Very good. Very good.
All right, here we go. It's the Unplugged program in 3, 2.
The successor to IP tables.
This is Linux Unplugged, episode 263 for the 21st. Is it the 21st? Sure is. Oh, thank you. All right. This is Linux Unplugged, episode 263 for August 21st, 2018. Welcome to Linux Unplugged, your weekly Linux talk show that's pushing all of the buttons, installing the distros, and just happy to be here to talk about free software. My name is Chris.
My name is Wes.
Hello, Wes. It's good to be with you, sir. I hope you're feeling well.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
smoke isn't getting to you? It's very smoky.
I do feel cold smoked,
Yeah.
but I'm persevering and more tasty.
Yeah, we have some smoke in the Washington area. It is thick out there, but that doesn't stop the Linux content coming down the pipe to you. Coming up on this week's episode of the Unplugged program, Docker has found itself in a bit of a controversy, and it's probably not the one you're thinking about. It's one Canonical found themselves in a long time ago, and it's one that sometimes our friends over at Elementary OS get a hard time about. But somehow, when it's Docker, it's egregious. We'll tell you about that. Plus, Flatpak has a big release. They're making a big stink, some new features, and some really exciting stuff is coming down the pipe for Flatpak. We'll cover a couple of cool apps. We'll get an update on some community events like Academy, OggCamp 18, and one that's up just around the corner. And then, at the end of the show, it seems there's a bit of a dispute between Intel and Debian when it comes to distributing those firmware updates that are fixing all of those problems like Meltdown. You see, In the last couple of months, there's been some changes in licensing verbiage, and the Debian project is calling Intel out. We'll tell you what's going on there, and why Intel says, guys, there's nothing to worry about. And then, let's get your life in order. Let's document things. We'll give you a way to create your own man pages in seconds on your Linux box. That's some stuff. Right?
I'm excited.
And we have a full stack today. We have a full stack. So first of all, let's start with Brent. Brent is here. Hey, Brent.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
Good. And the Mumble Room is here. Hello, Virtual Lug.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. We got a Wimpy in there. We got Joe in there. We got Dan and Cassidy from Elementary OS in there today. Plus some favorites in there. Like Mr. Mech is in there as always. Thomas from KDE is joining us to talk about Academy here in a little bit. So we just have a full room. I can't see everybody in the room, but I can see a lot of names in there, and that's a good list. So let's kick things off with the news. And that is that Docker is upsetting a lot of people. You see, Wes, they made a little change. They made a change on how downloads work. If you're downloading the Mac version or the Windows version of Docker, you now must provide your email address before you can download Docker. That you have to go through an email address that is associated with the Docker store. So you also would have to then, I suppose, make a Docker store account.
Oh, man. Is this like one of those white papers that no one ever wants to download ever?
Nope, it is Docker Community Edition, like the full Docker software.
Regular Docker install.
To get that free software, you now have to log in with your store account.
That's a big change, or at least it seems like it to the end user. What's their motivation here?
Well, so when it was brought out to them, they said, okay, all right, well, we appreciate that this is bothering you, and we understand that this can feel like a nuisance, but we've made this change to make sure we can improve the Docker for Mac and Windows experience for users moving forward. So that things don't need to change. We'll just close this issue, but you can feel free to continue to comment. Because they're going to improve your experience. What's funny is like this was an issue, but then when that line started to help improve your experience, then it just blew up. Because it turns out anybody who's clever enough to use Docker is clever enough to read through a marketing line when they see one.
Yeah, I think so.
And so the controversy really is around two things. Number one, that they're using this bullshit to improve your experience line. And number two is that it is putting essentially free software behind a Docker store account, like a Docker Hub account. And you have to log into that Hub account to download the software.
Now, presumably you could still compile it for yourself. That's just not something users on those platforms are very much accustomed to doing.
Right. And it's not like they're going to go app-get it on Windows.
Do we have any sympathy, either you, Chris, or anyone in the Mumble Room, for the desire? We've been talking about elementary efforts. We've talked about Ubuntu wanting more information from user installs. Is there any legitimate purpose to the side of, we just want more information? And does this process actually give them that?
Yeah. Like, what information? So I joked in the intro that both Canonical and Elementary OS have kind of gotten heat for something similar, and that is, a download button where there's a dollar amount that you can enter. That got people all kinds of upset too. Now you don't have to sign up, you could just hit 0 and download. But so I guess let's start there. I'm kind of curious to know what the Elementary OS guys. So Dan, what do you think about this move? And do you see a big difference between putting it behind a suggested pay what you want and putting it behind an account where you have to have an account on their service?
I think requiring an account makes it a lot harder.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that in general, especially if it's things that we care about.
You cut out there. Say that again, Dan.
That I think we should encourage the monetization of software, especially if it's things we care about, because we want them to be around. We want them to be long-lasting. Yep. We don't want, especially for really visible projects like Docker, you don't want them to be controlled by special interests.
So Cassidy, I'm curious to know what you think about the messaging aspect of this. It seems like whenever you make a move like this, you put free software behind a level of nuisance, as they put it. You really have to manage the messaging. You really have to be careful in how you handle it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's always really hard, especially when you're coming from a place where you're making a change. You had this thing before and you could get one way before, and now you've made a change and now you have to provide more information or something to get it. That's a really tough move. When we basically rephrased our download to be paying for Elementary OS, we were really careful to always say, you're paying for Elementary OS. You're not being heavily encouraged to optionally download or optionally donate or something. We just said paying for it, but people didn't like that either too. So it's always really tough.
All right, I'm hitting pause because apparently our live stream's being a fucking piece of shit. And, that's what I give a fucking shit about. God dang it, man. I am so close to not even doing any of these shows live anymore and just, oh, God, I'm so warm and sweaty. I'm sweating profusely. Sorry if I'm getting cranky. Oh, man. All right.
Checking all systems.
Why don't you turn that AC on? Are you nearly as warm as
it's pretty crazy.
I am sweating buckets right now.
I guarantee it's not as hot as in my booth, man.
Yeah, probably not. All right, so how do I fix this thing? Thank you, Wes.
Mm-hmm.
All right, hopefully that fixes it. Oh man, I am like I haven't even brought the chat room up. I am so off my game today.
Woo.
263.
We should have like a little stream monitoring station over there with the separate headphones we can jump on and spot check this
You would
shit.
think, right? All right, now I gotta wipe my headphones off because they're soaked. BRB.
Man, I would hate to be the person who has to edit this show now.
Oh man.
Yeah, what a sucker.
I am wet. Okay. All right, well, before I hit resume, does anybody else have anything they want to say on this topic before we just plug right along? Yeah? Okay. Well, then we'll move right along. Yeah, go ahead. I don't know if I'm going to do the show with that off, though. Maybe open that window back up?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Wes. All right, here we go. Sorry about the delay. Multiple problems this morning. So the audio is better now on the live stream? I'm going to take that as a yes. I'm going to take that silence as a yes. Well, let's just keep moving right along, and let's talk about Flatpak 1.0 coming out. And it's the big one for the team. It comes with a collection of new features that application developers can take advantage of. Developers can mark their versions of their apps as end of life, which is a big deal. And it'll indicate to them when their apps are no longer supported. Sorry, I got to redo that. That was distracting. Well, let's talk about Flatpak 1.0. It's a big release from the team this week, and Flatpak 1.0 comes with a collection of new features that application developers can take advantage of. The number one thing that will probably make a big change in your life is developers can now mark their apps as end of life, which would indicate they're no longer supported. There is a new mechanism for apps to restart themselves, which is useful if they have to get access to something. So a prompt comes up, says, can I have access to this? And you say yes. And furthermore, Flatpak has seen a lot of stability improvements. Some of the biggest changes, though, are the ecosystem. Flatpak Hub has seen some nice updates. There's more and more apps on there now. And they're pretty proud of this release. There's several different posts about it. And one feature that jumped out at me that I would like to poke Wimpy about is this new portal system that allows apps to create sandboxes and then restart themselves. It allows applications to restart after they've been updated to start using a newer version or to increase sandboxing for parts of the application. Is this, Wimpy, I've been hearing about this XGD portal, I think it's called, which is like a system where applications could request access to, say, the camera. And then the user, at the time that would get a prompt at the time that tried to access the camera, and the user would accept or deny, sort of like you see in your web browser. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, I'm familiar with this. And we did some work with upstream Flatpak a few months ago, so that portal integration exists in Snaps as well.
Ah, that was my next question. Very cool.
So we're all playing nicely in the same sandpit there.
Yeah, I like to hear that. That's really great. I want to know more about Flatpak's peer-to-peer installs option. That's not something I'm very familiar with either. That seems like it could be interesting.
Another note here, they've gone the opposite way of Dropbox. They no longer require a file system that has extended attributes.
Nice. Now, most of the things that when we talk about Flatpak, they tend to be pretty technical in topic. The Flatpak team seems to really like to talk about the technical details.
I mean, and those are important to get right.
Yeah.
But you're right, that has been a lot of the messaging, maybe less so than some of their competitors.
Yeah, like when you hear about snaps, you hear about snap packages. You hear about new applications.
Exactly.
You don't often hear a lot about the technology. I mean, it's there if you go digging for it.
Yeah,
it's all out there.
You have a drink with a certain Mr. Martin Wimpress,
or
and
that.
then it comes out.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting, just a different kind of communication mode. But here's a little bit of the non-technical stuff wrote by Alexander Larson. He writes, most of my blog posts are about technical details, but the reason for the existence of Flatpak is not technical. I created Flatpak because the Linux application desktop ecosystem is fundamentally broken. As an app developer, you have no sane way to distribute the results of your work to users. Unless you have massive resources, the only realistic way is to wait for distributions to pick up your app. But we know that's riddled with issues. There's many problems there. Not all distros will pick up an app, first of all. And when they do, it's often a chicken and the egg problem where there's maybe like a web API that has to get updated, but you have to have a different version of PHP on the back end. And so like there's this multi-tiered dependency situation that can sometimes block app updates.
Right. Some applications just are not well structured in a way, not in bad in general, but just in a way that with traditional Linux applications are structured.
Yeah. And you also have this inevitable disconnect and middleman between the application developer and end user. So if you have a bug in Mumble, let's say, you probably should be first checking the Ubuntu bug tracker or the Fedora bug tracker for Mumble and see what the packager has in there and see if it's a Fedora. And then you get a reply back, say, no, this is an upstream bug. And then as an end user, you go upstream. And I think this is a huge reason why we have all of these freeloaders of free software, because it's tedious. It's tedious, and it's almost just too disconnected. And so with Flatpak, the goal is for the upstream developer to have control of updates. If the developer fixes an important bug, a new stable version is released so that users can immediately use it. Any bugs filed will be against the latest stable version. So the other thing that really does mean, I guess if you break it down, is that it means when you report bugs as a user, it's useful to you. There's a direct connection, and you get immediate feedback, and you get an immediate state, a new state of the app. And I think that's really a good thing for a lot of type of applications. But we are witnessing a fundamental paradigm shift in how software is deployed on Linux. And we've seen other fundamental paradigm shifts before, and we've survived just fine. So it's nothing to get concerned about. But the repo model truly is a sysadmin model. And Flatpaks and snaps and Docker images and app images, any way that you can easily distribute software and get it going is really the developer model to distribute software. And in the past, the sysadmins acted as a gatekeeper. The repo was like an approved application. Now, in practice, was it really that? Probably not, right? I mean, really, come on, let's be honest. People are probably just rushing to get the work in there sometimes. They're not like doing extensive tests. That's not true for all distros, but it's probably the case for some. But it does represent a fundamental shift here. You had to be root. You had to have access to the package management system. The operating system was tracking all of those packages, and you were in control of when you updated them or didn't update them. Now, with a lot of these things, Chrome started it really early on Windows and Mac, but you've just seen it take off. You've seen it take off. I'm struggling to think of a couple of examples on Linux desktop that currently auto-update that aren't snaps. I can't think of any. It just really hasn't taken off on the Linux desktop side, auto-update of applications.
Maybe some Electron apps, but those are bringing some methods from their other environments.
No, so with Electron, the only auto-update mechanism that exists is for Windows and Mac OS. And unless you're publishing, via one of the container formats that supports updates.
Okay. So this is a big shift, and how do we feel about that? I think I'm good with it. Because you got to keep in mind these things are containered. They have restricted access. They're not updating all of the libraries on your system. They're not necessarily dependent on what version of GTK or Qt you have installed. So all of the reasons why you needed a master orchestrator to orchestrate your packages are beginning to get chipped away. What the only real argument I can still have here with it and concern would be, well, you're fundamentally taking away my control. Obviously, I could disable those update features, but default's reign supreme. What do you think about that lack of control? Fundamentally, think about your computer. How would you feel if we got to a point in a couple of years where the majority of your desktop applications were just self-updating all the time? How would you feel about that?
I mean, I think in many ways we are there, just in that so much of what we use is really just a slim front end for backend servers, and we don't control the rollouts of those APIs or that software hardly at all.
Yeah.
You are right. I think you are trading some control, or at least easy understandability. Now, in most cases, that you still have all of that, at least for open source things packaged with these formats. But you're right. It was a time with a sysadmin where you could carefully craft, you could seal your dependencies. You knew that, oh, yes, you've got all this dynamic linking, and here's my one little app that I run. I trust all my system libraries that are maintained in a sane way, and it all kind of just fit together, at least if you had the software you needed. The developer mindset of today, or really just the idea of, I'm getting this package. I know I'm getting it from this developer. I don't need the middleman. I just want it to work. So as long as you trust the upstream that you're getting those updates on, it might be a good thing, right? And there might be a little then more too of, you didn't have to wait as the developer for your distribution to pick like, oh yeah, we're pushing out a new release and this looks like a good version of this over here. We'll pull in that version. You get to decide, hey, it's time. I feel good about this. It's stable. Have at it.
I do like that. That's why there, sometimes you'll have like stable versions of a snap and you'll have an edge version. But Brent, I'm curious to know what you think. Using your computer as a professional photo workstation, I would imagine, be a little alarmed if you opened up Darktable or something one day and it was a totally different UI.
Yeah, for anybody I think doing production who doesn't necessarily. Let me start that over. For anybody who's doing production, I think that it's critical to know that your system isn't changing under you. And so if you're, on a deadline or something like that, then I don't know if this auto update is exactly what you want to have happen without some kind of schedule, right? And I know one thing I hear so often on the Windows side of things is that Windows update just kills everybody during, presentations. We've all seen it, right? Just trying to get stuff done, and all of a sudden your computer changes under you.
Yeah.
I think a core part of the difference there is that it is the containerization and sandboxing, right? Like, Chris, you've certainly experienced, you did a bad Arch update way too close to a show, or maybe I did in reality, and your system is not quite hosed, but unless you've done a lot of other work to do a rollback, you just don't have that option, and maybe you've tainted a lot of things on your system. With a Flatpak, not so.
Katana, go ahead, Wimpy.
I was going to say, within the concept of snaps, there's a couple of things to bear in mind there. First of all, if an update happens beneath a running application, then that doesn't kill or destroy the application that you're using. The update happens in a new revision, and the next time you restart, close, rerun the application, then the update that happened in the background is applied effectively. And also, as an application publisher, you can take advantage of a facility called tracks. So if you have, major versions that introduce new and potentially breaking features, then you can publish tracks by version or whatever, so that, as a conservative user, if you've opted into the 1.0 release, you can stay with that for as long as you want, and then you make the decision to jump from the 1.0 release to the 2.0 release, for example.
All right, that makes sense.
Whereas if you want just security fixes, like everyone does, I want those automatically. Features and improvements and maybe even bug fixes, not so sure about. But if it's security patches, I want those while I'm not even at my computer.
Right, and so the publisher will be producing their 1.0 whatever minor version, and they would push their bug fixes and security fixes in there, and then you can choose when you want to hop onto the the new release train via a track. And there are lots of publishers that are using that mechanism.
All right,
and it will soon be possible with snaps to also install different versions of the same snap in parallel side by side, so you can have
great.
The old version and the future version installed side by side.
Yeah, I like that. All right, we got to move on, but I'm going to give Dan the last word on this. So Dan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think something we also got to consider is that we're coming from a world where we're used to applications only really being able to be updated every 6 months or every year or whatever your distro release cycle is. And app developers that are targeting the Linux desktop have really long release cycles. mainstream apps that are already used to faster release cycle models or software as a service and things like that, they're used to doing more incremental changes. So I think we're going to see more developers doing incremental changes. I don't think you're going to see like big, massive reworks of entire things that break your workflow. It's going to be little tweaks and refinements, and you won't really notice changes like really rapidly.
That makes sense. Yeah. And that would probably be much more received better. But that makes sense. And it would that makes sense. And it would probably be much well received by end users. You know, small incremental changes, just steady improvements.
It's also easier to get some feedback and make quick course corrections that way as well.
Yeah. All right. I know we have more to talk about it. Maybe we can jump in the post show if we have time. But I just wanted to give you a couple of picks from Flatpak while we're talking about Flatpak and Flatpak Hub. And the first one is Pulse Effects. Pulse Effects is an audio manipulation tool. And it's really great because if you just want to pop on a compressor or do a high pass or a low pass on some audio,
and
or
I do
run it through an EQ, like maybe you got a podcast that's a little hard to understand, or something like that, Pulse Effects will do that for you. And then on the Snap side, I noticed a new Snap package came out this week that looks really neat. I always like having like an alternative web browser. Like I've got my main browser, which is Firefox, and I've got Chrome, and I even have Opera installed. And the Opera would be like the one that I do like that one-off login to, or when it's like no minimum extension, so it's always really fast.
You maybe have got a big session going. You want just another mindset.
Yeah, I noticed there is a tabless browser that just showed up in the Snap store. I'm looking for the name for it right now. I don't know if you happen to know it off the top of your head, Wimpy, by any chance.
It's Calibri.
Calibri, yeah. And it's a little hard to find when you search for Calibri. So if you want to Google it, search for like Calibri browser or just do a snap find. And that looked pretty neat too. So that joins Opera recently as several browser options in the Snap store. It's pretty neat.
It makes it real easy when you want to bootstrap a new system, that's for sure.
Yeah. All right. So there is some community news. We're going to do a tight episode today because I got to get out of here for a doctor's appointment just in about a half hour. So it's going to be like a tight show. So I want to get to Academy this week because that just wrapped up. And Thomas has joined us. He is a board member over at KDE, and he went to Academy. And so we thought we'd use this opportunity to pick his brain about what Academy is and what kind of happened there, and why KDE has an event like this and all that stuff. So Thomas, welcome to Linux Unplugged.
Yeah, thank you. Hi.
Hi. So why don't we start with a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get to Academy.
Okay. Yeah, so I've been in the KDE community since about 10 years or so, and I've actually joined in the user experience usability team, and then later on, since now 2 years, I've been on the board of directors of KDE, which is the leading body of the official organization of KDE, and we do things like, for example, organize the Academy, which is the yearly KDE community and contributors conference.
Very good. So if I recall correctly, it's a 2-day event within like a couple of days or a few days of workshops and whatnot, and birds of the feather sessions and things like that. So what's the goal of Academy? Is this really like a time to bring people under the KDE umbrella together in one spot?
Yeah, exactly. That's about it. So it's as you said, the 2 days of a regular conference with talks where people just update the community on what they've been up to. So it can be application developers, Plasma developers, designers. It's really just seeing what others have been doing, and then this is followed, as you said, by the what you call WOF days, which is workshops and just communities discussing what they plan for the upcoming year, and or just some people gathering around a specific topic and just trying to come up with new ideas, and it's just helpful to have everybody in one place because it's just so much easier to discuss important topics when you're in the same room.
Sure. Oh, I bet. Yeah, absolutely. So give me an idea of what got done this year at Academy.
Yeah, so one very interesting thing this year was that we had several hardware vendors at Academy who are going to use our technology in the near future. So we had Pine64, who are making a ARM-based cheap laptop, who are now going to use Plasma as a desktop available on there. We had Mycroft, who, as you probably all know, are making desktop AI and virtual digital assistant. They are also they've become interested in us when one of ours created an integration of Mycroft into Plasma Desktop, and are now looking into more tighter cooperation with us. And we also had Slimbook, who are a desktop who have now been doing the second KDE focused laptop. And we also had Purism, who will offer Plasma Mobile as one of the operating systems for their new phone. And having all of them at Academy was really interesting, because they also talked among each other and thought about how they could collaborate, and also learned about what kind of ways they could use our technology in their hardware. So that is something which is fairly new for us, and it's really exciting to be working together with the industry, with hardware vendors.
No kidding. Yeah, I bet. That sounds like it was immensely valuable to have everybody there and have specifically those hardware folks there. That is really exciting to see that interest in KDE, and I assume the Plasma Desktop too. So one of the number one questions that always comes into the show whenever we mention, Academy happened, is do you release any of the talks or any of the sessions or any videos of the event?
Yeah, we do. So it's all on the Academy website. If you go, I think they're not available yet,
Sure.
But they will be available sometime in the coming weeks. You just go to the academy.kde.org website, then go to the program, and then you have all the sessions, and then there's the video and the slides if the presenter has uploaded them. But definitely the video is available for all the talks.
Great. And it moves around, right? So I imagine it'll be somewhere different next year?
Yeah, definitely. We haven't decided on a location yet. So if somebody has an idea and has a team of people who would like to host an academy, then we're still open for suggestions. So far it's been always within Europe, but we're also open to any locations outside of Europe. So it will be interesting to see where Academy will happen next year.
All right, Canada, you heard it here first. Canada, you could totally host Academy next year. I'm just saying. Brent, you could get that going, right?
We're going to work on it. I'll see what I can do. I'll talk to my people.
You just all get in one big room, chat it out. It's fine.
I'm totally bagsying this now before Popey hears about it.
Yeah, he went. I was gonna. I'm hoping to hear his impressions on the Ubuntu podcast soon, because
you will hear all about Popey's impressions of Academy on Thursday when we release the next episode of the Ubuntu podcast.
Well, I will, as always, be listening, because I'll be curious to hear that. Well, Thomas, thank you for coming on and telling us about it. Is there anything else you want to relay to the audience? I'll have academy.kde.org linked in the show notes, so people can check that out and keep an eye out for when the videos come. Is there any other resources they should probably know about?
Not really. I mean, there's also .kde.org, which is our main news site, and which had a summary of each day, and both the conference days and of the BOF days, so that can also be a quick entrance point.
I see, and there's some video up there too. Yeah. All right. .kde.org, which is something people, if you're a Plasma and KDE fan, something you should be checking out. Anyways, well, Thomas, thank you very much for coming on and taking the time to tell us about it. Sounds like it was a great event. I'm really happy to hear that. It's very good.
Yeah, it definitely was. Yeah. Thank you for having me in your show.
Now, while we're talking about community events, I would like to pick Mr. Wimpy's brain, and perhaps Joe, if he wants to share with the class too, about OggCamp, which is another event that I have not been to. OggCamp just wrapped up, OggCamp 18 on August 18th and August 19th in 2018. And it sounds like it's a pretty fun event, at least according to the guys' voices, which sounds like they had a little too much to drink. So why don't we start with Wimpy? How was your trip to OggCamp, Wimpy?
Well, as always, brilliant fun. So started on the Friday. I rolled out the Ubuntu podcast battle bus, picked Popey up from the local station, then we drove to meet Mark at his house, and then all the way up to Sheffield, and then out for the social event on the Friday evening, the first meetup at Og Camp, which took place in a pub in the town centre, and we pretty much took over the whole top floor of this pub. Which was good. Nice to see people you don't see very often, like Joe, for example. I only see Joe maybe 2 or 3 times a year, so good to catch up with Joe.
Yeah. Now, what actually happens there, though? I mean, what you just told me was you went out and had a good time.
Right, like in the past, I feel like I've been very jealous.
And that is part of what happens, right? Isn't it, Joe?
That's everything that happened for me, I'm afraid.
Honesty to the last.
Yeah. Why is that a bad thing, though, really? I mean, if you go in there, you're having a good time, hanging out with Linux folks, it's worth it, right?
Yes, the social.
Yeah, I just made the mistake. Yeah, I just made the mistake that I drank too much on the Friday and then ended up not actually waking up in time to see any of the talks, and then making the exact same mistake on the Saturday. But thankfully, Wimpy and Popey and Co actually managed to get up. So yeah, fill me in, man. I was there, but I didn't see any of it. So what did I miss?
So, Og Camp is a free culture unconference, and the organisers do arrange like a talk every hour or so that there is something happening on the main stage. So if you just turn up and everyone's feeling shy, there is something to sort of see and learn from. So there were 3 stages, the main auditorium and 2 smaller stages, and then there was also a Coder Dojo, which was run by Ben Nuttall from the Raspberry Pi Foundation. And that was basically a full weekend of teaching kids how to get started with programming and make interesting Raspberry Pi projects. And there was just I spent most of Sunday morning up there, and it was just chock full of games controllers and micro bits and robot parts and projecting equipment and musical instruments and all manner of stuff that they were, furiously plugging together and hacking about with and making projects out of it. It was pretty fantastic to see.
I bet.
And then in terms of the talks, there's obviously the scheduled talks. Some of those this year included somebody talking about, configuration management via the various tools that exist and giving people a primer on that. And one of my favorite talks was by a guy who was running mainframe emulators on a Raspberry Pi, which was just
beautiful,
just brilliant fun. Yeah, really good fun. So if you think that, it's sort of, those are the 2 extremes of what you can expect to find, and everything in between, a little bit about, cooperative organizations and the free culture and open source communities, and I think 1 or 2 live podcasts this year. So we did a big mashup with Joe. So that will be coming out on Joe's channel. He'll have details about that, and a couple of most of the podcasts in the UK sort of meet there, and some of them do their live shows from Og Camp as well.
I'm only just a little bit jealous, Chris.
I know. Me too. I was like, I want to go one of these days. I'll just come hang out. I want to ride
years anyway.
Yeah, I want to ride in the battle bus.
Me too.
That sounds like a good time.
The battle bus is fully Wi-Fi operational with power sockets for all popular makes and models of laptops.
Very nice. That is a battle bus. That is a bus that's designed for an event.
It probably is.
Now, I guess I should also give a mention to FOSCon. I won't be there, but I thought I'd mention it. It's going to be in Philadelphia, and it's coming up very soon. So go check this out, foscon.us, if you want to go. And they are doing it, I think, August 25th. Yep, August 25th. So if you are in the Philadelphia area and would like to go to a free open source software focused event, FOSCon 2018, in the International House of Philadelphia. Huh. How about that, Wes?
It looks like it should be a good time.
I don't suppose you're just going to randomly be in Philadelphia in a couple days.
No. Alas, no.
No, probably not. No, neither will I. But it does look like a good
for everyone who's lucky enough to be around that area.
So what's the verdict? Is there going to be an OG camp? Is this OG camp? Is it going strong? Is there an OG camp next year? Is that being discussed yet? Does anybody know?
There are already discussions about how to put on an OG camp again next year, and the wonderful John Spriggs, also known as John the Nice Guy Spriggs, is starting to bootstrap things.
Oh.
There is already a Trello board, and there has been some activity this morning.
Very good. So let's take a moment and thank the sponsors of this here show. And like I said, we're doing a tight one this week, and I want to get to this Intel stuff, and I want to get to making your own man pages with this cool command because it's just the best. So let's start by thanking Ting. Go to linux.ting.com to get $25 off a device, or if you bring your own device, you get $25 in service credit. The average Ting bill is just $23 per phone per month because it's smarter than unlimited. If you use less, you pay less. You pay for what you use wireless. Nationwide coverage with no contracts. However much you talk, text, or data you use, that's what you pay. That's why I've been a Ting customer for over 4 years, and they've got a great control panel, radically good, different than everybody, just better than everybody. Customer service, I mean, it's seriously better than everybody. And a bunch of really great devices. And Ting does a really good job of sorting through devices that should get a lot more attention, but they just, from like the general like tech press, from like your Verge outlets and they just don't get that attention. And there's so many good phones out there. You don't have to spend $1,000 on a smartphone. And whatever you are comfortable spending, you go to Ting's site and you own that phone outright. You know, it's yours. There's no contract. There's no other termination fee. It's yours. Oh, look at that. They have a 10-inch tab on here. Oh, I haven't seen them selling a tablet for a long time. $170 when you go to linux.ting.com.
That is not bad.
Yeah, with a 10-inch display. Yeah, that isn't bad. Anyways, it's a great service. Been a customer for a long time. I think you'll love it. So go to linux.ting.com. Something else I've been a customer for forever. DigitalOcean, do.co/unplugged. Give you a $100 credit when you sign up with a new account for 60 days. And you can try out their infrastructure for 60 days. With that $100 credit, you can do just about anything.
Wait, are you sure that's right? $100 credit?
I know. I'm waiting for them to figure out that they accidentally are still giving us that promo.
So hurry.
I'm like, guys, go out there and use this because they can't keep doing that. Can they? I mean, I don't know, man. It's a great deal, though, because you can do so much stuff, and every system has SSDs, and they got 40 gigabit connections coming into the hypervisors, a great dashboard.
It's only getting better. They've rolled out a bunch of new dashboard changes that are just blowing my mind.
Yeah, really good. Like, how often does that happen where they do like a big shift like that, and it's not a total controversy?
I logged in, and they had made some changes, and it didn't stop me at all. In fact, if anything, it was more intuitive.
Yeah, they really do get the design of that kind of stuff. It's a great platform. They'll get you up and going with a Linux box in seconds, really. Probably less than 55 seconds. And you can play with something you've been wanting to try for a long time up on their crazy fast infrastructure and then pop it into production. So go to do.co/unplugged. And thank you to Linux Academy, linuxacademy.com/unplugged. It's a platform to learn everything about Linux, the stuff that's going to look good on your resume, the stuff that's going to give you critical thinking skills, and the stuff you should just know. linuxacademy.com/unplugged. Every member has access to so much content, and they're always adding new content. They've been expanding out their Google Cloud platform, Azure, security, and of course, the essentials of Linux itself. It's interesting to really see how the market is growing so fast and how Linux Academy is impressively managing to keep up, despite the fact that their content is so rich and deep that it can take, I don't know if they've ever released the number publicly, but making content is always much harder than you think, and they can spend more than several months working on one set of courseware.
Yeah, something that takes you just a few minutes to click through or an hour or two to finish.
Yeah, and they will spend, and because it's like developing a full product with labs and interactive diagrams and videos and voiceovers and text guides and study cards and downloadable stuff that you can listen to, like audio or personal study books. Like, if it's really comprehensive, and then if you ever get stuck, they've got a real human being that can help you, that are topic experts, that are folks from the industry that Linux Academy has hired to not only create the courseware, but to answer your questions with it too. So a lot of times when you get stuck, you are asking the person that created that courseware. So not only are they a topic expert on that subject, but they're the ones that created that course. So it's really helpful. It's so valuable. And that's just part of why Linux Academy is such a great value. And you can try it 7 days for free when you go to linuxacademy.com/unplugged. That's linuxacademy.com/unplugged. You like my mic grab there?
Oh man, that was
I'm
just,
sure the
you
audience,
are a professional broadcaster.
They appreciate a good mic grab, I bet. grab me by the mic, I always say. Wes, I've always said that, haven't I? I've always said that. Let's talk about this Intel firmware thing. So Debian has labeled Intel firmware as now unredistributable by all OS vendors. They're speaking for everyone there. And, this is something that catches my attention because Debian is very careful about licensing. And they really go through this kind of stuff. And so here's essentially a breakdown of what happened. You see, Intel pushed out a new firmware update recently. And they reached out to some of the projects, like Debian, and said, hey, new firmware needs to go out. Can you package this up and send it? To which Debian promptly responded, no, we can't because you changed your license in an incompatible way a month ago, and now we can no longer redistribute firmware updates. And they link them to the text file that says, sorry, we can't do that. And some folks have tweeted rather strong feelings about the situation that Intel is putting users in. Here's one. Intel really effed up on the Foreshadow and SSBD microcode updates beyond any of my wildest thoughts. They added a long license to the microcode that doesn't allow redistribution, which is why Linux distributions won't be getting patched. Well, we know that's not true. They are already getting patched.
Right, and there are other distributions that are distributing these already.
Yeah.
So, not universal.
So it was like we tried to figure out what's going on here, and I dug around, and I found a tweet by the corporate vice president and GM of Intel's Open Source Technology Center. That seems like a good source to go to, right? So dug in there, and here's his reply. He says, this is just simply not true. You see, this is now you get the legalese. The license section 2, subsection 3, grants rights needed for redistribution. Specifically, and he's quoting, distribute an object code representation of the software provided by Intel through multiple levers of distribution. We're happy to work with them if there's still concerns. So now we have a Debian says and Intel says situation. And it's sort of created this impasse. And it's so funny how we get hung up on this kind of stuff. And I'm sure eventually get resolved, and it'll probably be resolved in a way that's beneficial for end users. But it has caused quite the upset on this particular thing. Lots of finger pointing at Intel for screwing this whole thing up. And so the response has been, well, so now what? So now what do we do? So Debian looks in a little further and they say, well, here's the problem. Above where you just told us to look, it says that, but before that we can't redistribute it. So we have ourselves a conflict within your license. Your license says you cannot distribute, and then further down says you can distribute. We don't know what to do here. So, and as far as I know, the last time I looked into this issue, that's where it has landed. It's landed on, Debian's not really sure what to do.
Yeah, and I mean, it does seem like they are working with Intel, and I've seen some other, asking people to don't just go harassing Intel. They have their own channels and things are being worked on.
Yeah, they are. Yes. Yeah.
It is kind of confusing too because like if you go download some of the tarballs here, the previous microcode release doesn't have the license file in there. But when prompted on the website, it pops up a thing that you do have to agree to the license to get the link. Now, once you have the link, you can just download it. On the latest one, no such pop-up, but a license in the tarball. So clearly there are some changes, and I can see why, Debian does have a long history of caring a lot about open source licensing. And while often as end users we might feel it can be pedantic at times, it is actually pretty important. So I can understand why they would want to take the cautious side.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I should also add that for a lot of these things, you can rebuild the package yourself pretty easily. You can install the microcode manually. If you are a big cloud provider, this is not the problem that you're having. It's more of a problem just for people like you and I.
Fair point. Yeah, it's just us end users. Just us end users getting screwed. Yeah, all right. Well, I have a sense this is going to get worked out. I really do. And if anybody knows anything different, send me a tweet. Let me know where this is going. But I have a sense it's going to get worked out. All right. Well, then let's end on a way for people to create their own man pages. Man pages are one of the greatest things that I didn't know about when I switched to Linux initially until like 6-7 months in, because I was very fortunate that I started playing with Linux in high school, and so that meant there was other high school kids that I could mess around with, and we all just bounced off each other. Look what you can do here. Try this out. Oh, this is Red Hat. This is this. This is Debian. This is that was our mode. We didn't, and there was no Google because I'm so old. God. There was no like web search to go like look up commands. So like not knowing that man existed was a huge oversight. You could get away with never using man today and just searching everything you need on Google.
Now, I don't recommend that you do that, but you're totally right. You absolutely can. And you probably just find some online man pages.
Yeah, so this is why this is egregious, because there was early on, and some of you might remember this, there was the Linux documentation project. I don't know if that rings a bell for some of you out there. And it was a valiant effort by a community on the internet to create a central repository of documentation on how to do things, which was outdated immediately and obviously was only applicable to certain distros, etc. So it never really was that great of a resource. And it couldn't compare to all of the other communities that are writing specifically about their distros that Google now helps you surface. So it took me a little while to find man, but once I found the man page system, I was so impressed. Like, wow, they just have this built in right here at the command line. Like, I can see example commands here. And that's when I really went, when I realized you could bring up a man page, and generally if you went all the way down to the bottom, there's a few example commands there.
Offline, just all of this knowledge right at your fingertips.
I feel like it's a bigger deal than we are capable of appreciating right now. And I don't know if that sounds silly, but I feel like today it's like, oh yeah, no big deal. But if you think about what life was like when you couldn't just easily search for stuff, that really, really helped. And that's how life is today for things that are sort of unique to your own setup or your own world. And wouldn't it be nice if you could have your own man pages so you can remember how to do stuff? Well, that's where this handy command that I love the name of comes in. It's called how do I? And is a command line utility for creating and maintaining your own set of man-like help pages. Man being short for manual, if you didn't know. And I love this. These man pages are written to be comprehensive, but what humans really need are just bullet points. So you could use to just write your own bullet points, and they would come out on the command line. And they include a couple of basic syntax formatting tips and a couple of basic commands you can run. And it's so neat. It's only available for macOS right now, but I sent off a letter to the developer today saying, hey.
And, I think that is also just because they've only packaged it in Homebrew, because I've got it running right here, Chris.
Well, that's awesome. I was going to say, hey, there is some ways to get this installed on Linux that don't use Brew. I sent off a note to him today, so maybe we'll see something there. But yeah, you can build it yourself. And what do you think?
Well, okay, so there are already ways to make man pages extensible, and there's a lot of design in the man page system that, just to facilitate that a bit. That said, I think there is something of a disconnect between people that are experts in how to do that, and then especially know how to typeset and create man pages in the proper or at least historically correct ways. I think, again, where this tool maybe shines, and we'll see how popular it becomes, is that casual developer, you use man pages somehow, you don't really understand how it all works, but if you can just type a command and, you just have to edit a markdown file, it uses Pandoc and other stuff behind the scenes to convert that, display it with man-like utilities. It does look nice, and I just added a couple, and it was really easy. So I think that's the kicker right there.
Cool. Now, Brent, you've got a whole solution for your own man management right now.
Well, I would say it's my attempt at cobbling something like this together in the last several years. I'm sure I'm not the only one doing this, but I've just kind of started haphazardly keeping text files of notes of solutions and tricks and little shortcuts of various commands, and in basically just text files in a folder that gets synced to all my machines. And so it would be interesting to see it in a little bit of a ever so slightly easier to access solution like this. I kind of like this idea.
Yeah. Getting to sync would be like the next thing, right? Syncing it across, like maybe even like it wouldn't have to sync continuously, just when you update. And
there are already some efforts for collaborative sorts of documentation. It would be interesting to see some of those prepackaged in sets you could maybe go grab. I'm a Ruby developer. Give me a set that has a bunch of common Ruby tools, and away I go.
Wow, I like that. All right, guys. Well, like I said, it is a tight one today because I have an appointment that I cannot miss. And so we're going to get out of here a little early today. But the Unplugged show is live on Tuesdays. If you'd like to make it out next week, go to jblive.tv. And it's also available in your local time at jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar. Go get more Wes Payne. He's on the TechSnap program, techsnap.systems. Go get more Wimpy. He's on Ubuntu podcast. Go get that this Thursday. Sounds like it's going to be a great one. You can find Dan and Cassidy over at Elementary OS. We'll have their respective Twitter handles linked in our show notes. And a big thank you to Thomas for coming on the show today and chatting with us about Academy. Much appreciated, Thomas, for that. So, even though it's a little short today, we're going to wrap it up there. I'll leave you with just a couple of bits of wisdom. We would love to have you subscribe to the RSS feed if you're not already. You can go to linuxunplugged.com to get links to all the stuff we talked about, specifically Linux Unplugged /263 for links that are specific to this episode. But while you're over there, you can go to the subscribe page and you can get all the different ways to get this here episode every single
And there's a lot of them.
There are. There's different podcast directories and whatnot. We try to make it wherever you want to be. So you can find all of those resources at linuxunplugged.com. In the meantime, we're out of here. I'm going to go get checked up. Wes is going to go surf the smog.
And then that gives everyone plenty of time to prepare their questions for Ask Noah.
That's right. See you next Tuesday. The Unplugged Show. The Unplugged Show.
Well, it was the Unplugged Show.
Yo. Yeah, it's all done now, isn't it? I never sing on mic. I don't know. It's like it's instinctual because I'm like sitting here fiddling with buttons and stuff, and I can't help it.
Next year, next episode, I'll just bring a little ukulele. You can back you up.
We'll just
get the Unplugged band going.
I like that idea. I like that. Well, guys, thank you for making it, and it was really good to hear from all of you. Appreciate it very much. Sorry I had to cut it short this week, but it's so hot in here. It's actually not that bad. It's if we're gonna cut it short, this would be the week to do it. I
Perfect.
guess. Woo. Jabby titles.
Yeah, let's go get some voting on. It's important to vote. Not that it's a democracy, because it's not.
Why don't you turn that guy back on for us? Academy case studies, strictly for academic minds with a K in there. Updates from the source. Quintana, did you want to jump in on your point about flat packs? Yay? Nay? No? Okay. Very good.
I think it might actually be Katana Na.
Katana Na Na.
He doesn't quite realize.
Batman. I know it's in there. I don't have to ask them if they can hear it. I know it's in there. I know it's in there.
That was perfect.
Amazing.
Okay. What do we think? Campy people, serious talk, the dev takeover. JB titles, JB titles. JB titles. JB.
Updates from the source.
JB titles. Updates from the source isn't bad, huh?
No. There's kind of hits on the Debian Intel stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously hits on Flatpak.
Yeah. And we got updates from Thomas.
Yep.
So
he is part of the source.
I'm feeling like that might be our title, guys. Well, that's nice. It's nice when it's not arduous. Why now? If I
think that's actually one of the strengths of the show too, right? We tend to bring on some people that know what they're talking about.
It's true. If I could get my copy to work, so this will be the fourth time. There we go. That time it worked. I've had a bad Firefox day. I've had several weird Firefox problems that have just been not game changers for me, just really annoying.
Those little chinks in the armor.
Yeah. All right. Well, I do have to go. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. I really do appreciate it, and I hope to see you next week. I'm leaving you an hour early, but Noah will be around in about an hour for the Ask Noah program.
Come up with your questions. Get psyched.
Yeah. All right. Goodbye, Mumble Room. Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye now. All right.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah. Oh, yes, sir.
I have to apologize for interrupting your intro at the start of the show. I don't know if you heard that, but I just was wondering if you needed a countdown at all for my audio file, or if you're just going to skip it.
We have not used your audio yet, so.
Oh, great. That's a good thing.
Yeah, the Source Connect audio is pretty clean. Yeah, it's still good to have it backed up, but yeah. All right.
Well, how about I'll just save it and I won't send it. If you need it, let me know.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that'd be perfect. All right, chat room. All right, Brent. You guys have a good rest of your days too.
See you next week.
Good luck today.
Bye, guys. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
This week on the show, we have the strange birth and long life of Unix for you, FreeBSD jails covering a single public IP, EuroBSDCon 2018 talks and schedule is available, OpenBSD on a G4 iBook, a PAM template user example for you, ZFS file server setup, and reflections on 1 year of using OpenBSD in this week's episode of BSD Now. BSD Now, episode 259, Long Live Unix. Recorded for the 15th of August, because we're in Cambridge that time, 2018. Hello, I'm your host, Benedikt Reuschling.
And I'm Alan Jude.
Yeah, that's our episode where we are not actually here, but you have an episode to watch while we have fun in Cambridge. And before we get into our headlines this week, we start to raffle out our winner, or the one winner, for the Mojix Power Bagel that we have raffled off since episode 256. Remember our little contest there? And people have been sending us answers. Mostly were right. So it's about the numbers that were there in the 4 December episodes. We had people that were sending just one of them. And but a couple of people sent us their replies, which were correct, and we listed them here. And Alan will now play Lady Luck, or at least the random number generator would do that. And Alan just execute.
So we had 15 people who bothered to email in correct answers. And the winner is number 12, Eddie.
Eddie. Okay, so I will contact Eddie offline and make sure that this little item gets into Eddie's hands. It might take a while because shipping around the world sometimes takes longer than expected, wherever Eddie may be in relation to the Power Bagel. But other than that, congratulations. You are winner of episode 256 Gimmick, the Power Bagel. And you have 4 friends to connect you with this thing, which makes it even more awesome to have.
Yes. And all of you who procrastinated and didn't write in an answer, well, that's what you get. Nothing.
Yeah. Contest over. Better luck next time. Maybe we'll do something in the future if there's another lucky episode number coming up, or whenever we feel like it. Okay. Now that's off the track here. Let's head to the headlines, which has the strange birth and long life of Unix in this.
Yes. So they say when one door closes on you, another opens. People generally offer this bit of wisdom just to lend some solace after some kind of misfortune. But sometimes it's actually true. It certainly was for Ken Thompson and the late Dennis Ritchie, 2 of the giants of 20th century information technology, when they created the Unix operating system, now considered one of the most inspiring and influential pieces of software ever written. A door had slammed shut for Thompson and Ritchie back in March of 1969, when their employer, the American Telephone and Telegraph Company, now called AT&T, withdrew from a collaborative project with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the University MIT, and General Electric to create an interactive time-sharing system called Multics, which stood for Multiplex Information and Computing Service. Time sharing was a technology that let multiple people use a single computer simultaneously. Had been invented only a decade earlier. Multics was to combine that time sharing concept with other technological advances of the era, allowing users to phone into a computer from a remote terminal and use it to read email, edit documents, run calculations, and things like that. It was to be a great leap forward in the way computers were mostly used back then, where people tediously prepared and submitted batch jobs on punch cards to be run and then to get the output. This would make
the good old days.
Interactive.
Oh, yeah, very much so.
So over the span of 5 years, AT&T invested millions of dollars in the Multics project, including purchasing a GE 645 mainframe computer and dedicating the effort of many of its top researchers at the company's renowned Bell Laboratories, including Thomas and Ritchie, Joseph Osana, Stuart Feldman, Douglas McElroy, and the late Robert Morris. But the new system was too ambitious and fell troublingly behind schedule. In the end, AT&T's corporate leaders decided to pull the plug. After AT&T's departure from the Multics project, the managers at Bell Labs, the office in Murray Hill, New Jersey, where most of this happened, became reluctant to allow any further work on computer operating systems, leaving some researchers there very frustrated. That's what they were here for. Although Multics hadn't yet met many of its objectives, it had, as Ritchie later recalled, provided them with a convenient interactive computing service, a good environment in which to do programming, and a system around which a fellowship could form. Suddenly, that was gone. So with heavy hearts, the researchers returned to using their old batch system. At such an inauspicious moment, the management's dead set against the idea, it surely would have seemed foolhardy to continue designing a computer operating system. But that's exactly what Thomas, Ritchie, and many other Bell colleagues did. Now, some 40 years later, we should be thankful that these programmers ignored their bosses and continued their labor of love, which gave the world Unix, one of the greatest computer operating systems of all time. The Rogue project began in earnest when Thompson, Ritchie, and the third Bell Labs colleague, Rudd Kennedy, began to sketch out on paper the design for a file system. Thompson then wrote the basics of a new operating system for the lab's GE 645 mainframe. But with the Multics project ended, so too had the need for that GE 645. Thompson realized that any further programming he did was likely to go nowhere, so he stopped the effort. Thompson had passed some of his time, after the demise of Multics, writing a computer game called Space Travel, which simulated all the major bodies in the solar system, along with a spaceship that could fly around between them. Written for the GE 645, Space Travel was clunky to play and expensive, roughly $75 a game for the CPU time it took to play. Hunting around, Thompson came across a dusty old PDP-7, a mini-computer built by the Digital Electronic Corporation, that some of his Bell Labs colleagues had purchased earlier for a circuit analysis project. So Thompson rewrote his space travel game to run on that. And with this little programming exercise, a second door cracked ajar. It was to swing wide open in the summer of 1969, when Thompson's wife, Bonnie, spent a month visiting his parents to show off their newborn son. Thompson took advantage of his temporary bachelor existence to write a good chunk of what would become the Unix operating system for that discarded PDP-7. The name Unix stems from an old joke one of Thompson's colleagues made. Because the new operating system supported only one user, Thompson, he saw it as the emasculated version of Multics and dubbed it the Unmultiplexed Information and Computing Service, or Unix, U-N-I-C-S. The name later morphed into Unix with an X. So initially, Thompson used the GE 645 to compose and compile the software, which he then downloaded to the PDP-7. but he soon weaned himself off of the mainframe, and in the end of 1969, he was able to write an operating system on the PDP-7 itself. That was a step in the right direction, but Thomson and others who were helping him knew that the PDP-7, which was already obsolete, would not be able to sustain a skunkworks like this for long. They also knew that the lab's management wasn't about to allow any more research on operating systems. So Thomson and Ritchie got creative. They formulated a proposal for the boss to buy one of DEC's new minicomputers, the PDP-11, but couched the request in especially palatable terms. They said they were aiming to create tools for editing and formatting text, and that you might call a word processing system today. The fact that they would also have to write an operating system for the machine to support the editor and text formatter was almost a footnote. Management took the bait, and an order for PDP-11 was placed in May of 1970. The machine itself arrived soon after, although the disk drives for it took more than 6 months to actually appear. During that interim, Thomson, Ritchie, and others continued to develop Unix on the PDP-7. After the PDP-11's disks were finally installed, the researchers moved their increasingly complex operating system over to the new machine. Next, they brought over the ROF text formatter written by Joseph Osana and derived from the runoff program, which had been used in an earlier time-sharing system. Unix was put in its first real-world test with Bell Labs when 3 typists from AT&T's patent department began using it to write, edit, and format patent applications. It was an instant hit. The patent department adopted the system wholeheartedly, which gave the researchers enough credibility to convince management to purchase another machine, a newer and even more powerful PDP-11, a newer model, although their stealth work on Unix could continue.
Yep.
During its early days, Unix evolved constantly, so the idea of issuing named versions or releases seemed inappropriate. But the researchers did issue new editions of the programmer's manual periodically, and the early Unix systems were named after each of the editions of the manual.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The first edition of the manual was completed in November of 1971. So what did the first edition of Unix offer that made it so great? For one thing, the system provided a hierarchical file system, which allowed something we now take for granted, having files that can be placed in directories, rather than every file just being in the root of the file system.
Yeah, it's a Unix system.
Each file could contain no more than 64 kilobytes of data, though, and its name could be no more than 6 characters long. These restrictions seem awkwardly limiting now, but at the time, they seemed entirely adequate. If you're writing just pure text, 64 kilobytes is quite a bit of text. So
yeah, you can go a while
up into
with that.
chapters and you're fine. So, although Unix was essentially created for word processing, the only editor available in 1971 was the line-oriented ed.
Woo!
There's a whole book on that if you're interested.
Yeah, it's just great.
Today, ed is still the only editor guaranteed to be present on all Unix systems, apart from the text processing and general system applications. The first edition of Unix included games such as blackjack, chess, and tic-tac-toe. For the system administrator, there were tools to dump and restore disk images to magnetic tape, to read and write paper tapes, and to create, check, mount, and unmount those removable disk packs. Which, not like a floppy disk or a USB stick today, the disk packs were huge. Most important, the system offered an interactive environment that by this time allowed time sharing, so several people could use a single machine all at once. Various programming languages were available, including BASIC, Fortran, and scripting for the Unix command line, assembly language, and B. The last of these, a descendant of BCPL, the Basic Combined Programming Language, ultimately evolved into its immensely popular C programming language, which Rishi created while also working on Unix. Again, part of the reason was, as they kept moving between different hardware, they wanted to be able to use the same code.
Makes sense.
So the first edition of Unix let programmers call 34 different low-level routines built into the operating system. I think even today, the number's only 200-ish.
Yeah, they haven't grown out of proportions.
It's a testament to the system's enduring nature that nearly all of these system calls are still available and heavily used on modern Unix and Linux systems, even 4 decades later. For its time, first edition Unix provided a remarkably powerful environment for software development. Yet it contained just 4,200 lines of code at its heart and occupied a measly 16 kilobytes of main memory when you ran it.
Oh, yeah.
I do believe we have more than 4,200 lines of code for some really trivial things nowadays.
Yeah, unfortunately, some bloat has happened over the years. Yeah.
I think I've written that much ZFS code myself. Anyway, Unix's great influence can be traced in part to its elegant design, simplicity, portability, and the serendipitous timing. But perhaps even more important was the devoted user community that soon grew around it. Going back to some of the original ideas with Multics, it was something we could build this fellowship around. And that came about only by an accident of its unique history. The story goes like this. For years, Unix remained nothing more than a Bell Labs research project, but in 1973, its authors felt the system was mature enough for them to present a paper on it at a design and implementation symposium at the Association of Computer Machinery. This paper was published in 1974 in the Communications of the ACM. Its appearance brought a flurry of requests for copies of this magical software. That put AT&T in a bind. In 1956, AT&T had agreed to a U.S. government consent decree that prevented the company from selling products not directly related to telephones and telecommunications, in return for its legal monopoly status in running the country's long-distance phone service. So Unix could not be sold as a product. Instead, AT&T released a Unix source code under a license to allow anyone who asked, charging only a nominal fee. The critical wrinkle here was that the consent decree prevented AT&T from supporting Unix. Indeed, for many years, Bell Labs researchers proudly displayed their Unix policy at conferences with a slide that read, "No advertising, no support, no bug fixes, payment in advance."
Oh, great. That wouldn't work nowadays.
Well, isn't that exactly what we do with FreeBSD?
Yeah, but not that explicit. I mean,
well,
as a selling
I guess
point.
we do offer some bug fixes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. From time to time.
So, with no other channels of support available to them, early Unix adopters banded together to provide mutual assistance, forming a loose network of user groups all over the world. They had the source code, which helped a lot. And they didn't view Unix as some standard software product because nobody seemed to be looking after it. So these early Unix users themselves set about fixing bugs, writing new tools, and generally improving the system to better suit their needs. The Unix user group acted as a clearinghouse for the exchange of Unix software in the United States. People could send in magnetic tapes with new software or fixes for the system and get back tapes with software and fixes from other members. In Australia, the University of New South Wales and the University of Sydney produced a more robust version of Unix, the Australian Unix Share Accounting Method, which could cope with large numbers of concurrent users and offered even better performance. So by the mid-1970s, the environment of sharing had sprung up around Unix, resembled the open source movement so prevalent today. Users far and wide were enthusiastically enhancing the system, and many of their improvements were being fed back to Bell Labs for incorporation in a future version. But as Unix became more popular, AT&T's lawyers began looking harder at the various licensees and what they were doing with the systems. One person in particular who caught their eye was John Lyons, a computer scientist then teaching at the University of New South Wales in Australia. In 1977, he published what was probably the most famous computing book at the time, a commentary on the Unix operating system, which contained a complete annotated listing of the source code for Unix with notes about it and so on. Unix's license condition allowed for the exchange of source code, and initially Lion's book was sold to licensees. But in 1979, AT&T's lawyers had clamped down on the book's distribution and use in academic classes. The anti-authoritarian Unix community reacted as you might expect, and started photocopying copies of the book and spreading them around. Many of us have nearly unreadable nth generation photocopies of the original book.
Yeah, the copy of the
most
copy
people
of the
had
copy.
very degraded copies.
Fax me your copy so I can copy it a couple of times more. Yeah, that's
give it to
probably
some
how it
friends,
goes.
and then they'll copy it for their friends, and eventually it'll just be a grainy thing nobody can read.
What's this? Yeah.
This end run around AT&T's lawyers indeed became the norm, even at Bell Labs. For example, between the releases of the 6th edition of Unix in 1975 and the 7th edition in 1979, Thompson collected dozens of important bug fixes to the system, coming both from within and without the Bell Labs. He wanted these to filter out to the existing Unix user base, but the company's lawyer felt that it would constitute a form of support and balked at doing a release. Nevertheless, those bug fixes soon became widely distributed through unofficial channels. For instance, Lou Katz, the founding president of Unix, received a phone call one day telling him that if he went down to a certain spot on Mountain Avenue, where Bell Labs was then located, at 2 p.m., he would find something of interest. Sure enough, Katz found a magnetic tape with the bug fixes, and then he started spreading it to users.
This sounds like a
bad
spy story.
Movie.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So by the end of the 1970s, Unix, which had started a decade earlier as a reaction against the loss of the comfortable programming environment of Multics, was growing like a weed through academic and IT industry. Unix would flower in the early 1980s before reaching the height of its popularity in the early 90s. For many reasons, Unix has since given way to other commercial and non-commercial systems, but its legacy, that of an elegant, well-designed, and comfortable environment for software development, lives on. In recognition of their accomplishments, Thompson and Ritchie were given the Japan Prize earlier this year, when I'm not sure which year this article was written, adding to a collection of honors that include the United States National Medal of Technology and Innovation and the Association of Computing Machinery's Turing Award. Many others, often very personal, tributes to Ritchie and his enormous influence on computing were widely shared after his death just a few years ago. Unix was indeed one of the most influential operating systems ever invented. Its direct descendants, now numbering the hundreds, on one side of the family tree, there are the various versions of Unix proper, which began to be commercialized in the 1980s after the Bell Systems monopoly was broken up, freeing AT&T from the stipulations of that 1956 consent decree that stopped them from selling other products and services. On the other side are various Unix-like operating systems derived from the versions of Unix developed at the University of California at Berkeley, including the one Apple uses today in its computers, OS X. I say Unix-like because the developers of BSD, the Berkeley software distribution, Unix, on which these systems are based, worked hard to remove all of the original AT&T code so that their software and its descendants would be freely distributable. The effectiveness of these efforts were, however, called into question when AT&T's subsidiary, Unix Systems Laboratories, filed suit against the Berkeley Software Design and the Regents of the University of California in 1992 over intellectual property rights for the software. The university, in turn, filed a counterclaim against AT&T for breach of the license it provided AT&T for the use of code developed at Berkeley. The ensuing legal quagmire slowed the development of free Unix-like clones, including 386BSD, which was designed for the Intel 386 CPU. And this is the reason why Linux ended up being invented and why FreeBSD kind of missed out on being the de facto operating system for probably almost everything, if it hadn't been for this one pesky lawsuit.
But we got out of it.
Yeah, so had this operating system been available at the time, Linux Torvald says he probably wouldn't have bothered creating Linux, an open source Unix-like operating system he developed from scratch for his PC in the early 90s. Linux has carried the Unix baton forward into the 21st century, powering a wide range of digital gadgets, including wireless routers, televisions, so on. FreeBSD is still here.
Yeah, we're not dead yet.
And we're running in televisions and routers and washing machines.
We're there, yeah.
And Android smartphones contain a bunch of BSD too. Anyway, although AT&T quickly settled its legal dispute with BSDI and the University of California, legal wranglings over intellectual property claims to various parts of Unix and Linux have continued over the years, often involving Byzantine corporate relations. By 2004, no fewer than 5 major lawsuits have been filed. And even just a couple of years ago in August, a company called TSG, which had bought up part of SCO Group, lost a bid in court to claim ownership of the Unix copyright that Novell had acquired when it purchased the Unix Systems Laboratories for AT&T in 1993.
That mess.
As a programmer and Unix historian, I can't help but find all this legal sparring a bit sad. From the very start, the authors and users of Unix worked as best they could to build and share, even if it meant defying authority. That outpouring of selflessness stands in sharp contrast to the greed that has driven the subsequent legal battles over the ownership of Unix.
Here.
The world of computer hardware and software moves forward startlingly fast. For IT professionals, the rapid pace of change is typically a wonderful thing, but it makes us susceptible to the loss of our own history, including the important lessons from the past. To address this issue in a small way, in 1995, I started a mailing list of old-time Unix aficionados. This effort morphed into the Unix Heritage Society. Our goal is not only to save the history of Unix, but also to collect and curate those old systems and, where possible, bring them back to life. With help from many talented members of this society, I was able to restore much of an old Unix software to working order, including Ritchie's first C compiler from 1972 and the first Unix system to be written in C dating from 1973.
Oh, wow.
One holy grail that eluded us for a long time was the first edition of Unix in any form, electronic or otherwise. Then, in 2006, Al Kassow from the Computer History Museum in Mountain View unearthed a printed study of Unix dated from 1972, which not only covered the internal workings of Unix, but also included a complete assembly listing of the kernel, the main component of the operating system. This was an amazing find, like discovering the old Ford Model T collecting dust in the corner of a barn. But we didn't just want to admire the chrome work from afar, we wanted to see if it would run again. So, in 2008, Tim Newsom, an independent programmer in Hawaii, and I assembled a team of like-minded Unix enthusiasts and set out to bring this ancient system back from the dead. The work was technically arduous and often frustrating, but in the end, we had a copy of the first edition of Unix running on an emulated PDP-11/20. We sent out messages announcing our success to all those who thought it would be interesting. Thompson, always succinct, simply replied, "Amazing." Full stop.
Yeah.
Indeed, his brainchild was amazing, and I've been happy to do what I can to make it, and the story behind it, better known.
Oh, yeah. And the rest is history. And it's continuing. I mean, in 20 years, maybe someone else will report the missing bits that we are now writing. And yeah, it's part of the Unix story.
It's another thing where we're being as careful as we can consciously be with FreeBSD to make sure we keep as much of the old stuff around as we can.
Yeah, the Unix torch and, the old ideas and the concepts of Unix and its underpinnings.
A thing that's come up recently is in commit messages, we often reference external things. I think it originally came up because somebody was linking to a GitHub thing that contained more context, like I think it was the PR or something.
Yeah.
And so if it's the FreeBSD bug database, we have basically everything's in Bugzilla. We imported the old NATs into Bugzilla. So I think every bug that's ever been filed against the FreeBSD project is in that database. But when we reference things like GitHub, if 20 years from now GitHub is gone, which entirely possible, those links won't work anymore.
Yeah, and that's that
and
history.
It's like, how do we like drive a version of archive.org or something that just crawls any links in commit messages and make sure we archive a copy of that context?
Yeah, that's a major undertaking.
We have the mailing list archives, and we have the bug database, and we have our reviews database, but we need to maybe look at trying to archive external things.
Yeah, and then the history is preserved. But it's difficult because the net is spreading and...
more of these software archaeologists and anthropologists.
Yeah, digging into the histories of the early days.
Helping preserve the history of all this Unix stuff.
Yeah, great article, for the beginning of BSD and Unix.
So it probably won't help you run first edition Unix, but if you do want to run modern Unix on a machine, you might want that machine to be in the cloud and have fast internet. So head over to digitalocean.com and spin up a droplet. It takes less than a minute, and you can get a machine with 1 gigabyte of memory. Remember, Unix first edition only took 16 kilobytes of memory.
That's a lot now, yeah.
A modern vCPU, 25 gigabytes of SSD disk, which is so much faster than the disk back then that you can't even measure it, and includes 1 terabyte of internet transfer on the gigabit connection for the VM. All that for just $5. Or actually, 0.7 cents per month.
Very low entry to start, and you always wanted maybe to build a little cluster with multiple machines communicating among each other. That's also possible by spinning up multiple of those and connecting them. You don't
because of the hourly pricing, you don't even need to spend $5 in each one. If you're only going to play with it for the weekend, that's 0.7 cents times 4 instances times 6 hours or whatever. It adds up to not very much.
And you can start right away because you don't have to spend much time installing, because with the pre-built apps, you can basically have a pre-installed version there, no installing, no much configuration going on, and you can just connect them together and then they will work their little way. Or do a global availability thing over multiple regions where you can select which data center these run on, and then you have a globally distributed networky thing, whatever it might be in DigitalOcean's cloud.
Yep. And remember, if you go to do.co/BSD now, you can get a $100 credit for your account. That deal is not going to last. You need to hurry up and do that soon. It only lasts 60 days. Once you sign up, you get the money for 60 days, but you won't be able to sign up for very much longer. So you need to hurry up and take advantage of that and try it out for free before you miss your chance.
Yeah. With a new account, you can charge that up, and $100 goes a long way in DigitalOcean.
Yeah. If instances are $5 or $10 or $15 for 3 gigs of RAM, then even over 60 days, you'd have to spin up, 2 machines. You need like 6 gigs of RAM for 2 months for free. Come on. So
how much can you do?
If you already have an account, use the coupon code FreeBSD now, and you'll get a $10 credit that doesn't expire.
Oh yeah, that's also a worthwhile start. So you can try out DigitalOcean the way it works, and if you like it, then keep your droplets. It's fine.
So hurry up and do that before time runs out.
Yep.
Speaking of that, if you happen to have a DigitalOcean droplet, it only has 1 IP address. If you want to run a bunch of jails, how do you do that?
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting question, but this article here, or this little tutorial actually answers that, because this says FreeBSD jails with a single public IP address. So this starts with jails in FreeBSD provide a simple yet flexible way to set up a proper server layout. In the most setups, the actual server only acts as the host system for the jails, while the applications themselves run within those independent containers. Traditionally, every jail has its own IP address for the user to be able to address the individual services running in them. But if you're still using IPv4, this might get you in trouble, as the most hosters don't offer more than a single public IP address per server. So first, you create the internal networking. In this case, network address translation based, or NAT for short, is a short and good way to expose services in different jails using the same IP address. So first, let's create an internal network at 192.186.0.0/24. You could generally use any private IP address they write, as specified in RFC 1918. But here's an overview of private networking on Wikipedia if you want to read up on that. So using PF, FreeBSD's firewall, or at least one of them, we will map requests on different ports on the same public IP address to our individual jails, as well as provide network access to the jails themselves. So first, let's check what network interfaces we have, actually. In this case, there's an EM0, which provides connectivity to the internet, and LO0, which is the local loopback device. So this is the output here. And so for our internal network, we create a clone loopback device called LO1. Therefore, we need to customize the rc.conf file in etc, adding the following lines. So cloned interfaces equals LO1, and IPv4 addresses for LO1 in 192.168.0.1-9/29. So this defines a /29 network offering IP addresses for a maximum of 6 jails. And this is the IP calculator, so you can see how the subnet mask matches to that, and the bits with the wildcards and all that. Now we need to restart the network, of course, to actually make those changes set in the system. They write, please be aware of current active SSH sessions that might be cut off, as they might be dropped off during the restart. And it's a good moment to ensure you have KVM access to the server, because you might lock yourself out.
In particular, when you do service native restart, it will take down the network interface and put it back up. What won't be there after that is your default route. If you have DHCP, it'll renegotiate or whatever. But if you had a static IP address, you also need to do service routing start in order to get your default gateway back.
Yeah, or do route at default GW. And then the default gateway.
GW. It's not Linux. Just route, add default, and the IP address.
Oh, right. Yeah. I keep mixing them up. Okay, but after that's done, after reconnecting, our newly created loopback device is active. So there's now LO1 with a bunch of internet addresses on it, 192.168.0.1 till .9 at the end. This is the one that we set earlier. So now, setting up. PF part of the FreeBSD base system, so we only have to configure and enable it. By this moment, you should already have a clue of which services you want to expose. If this is not the case, just fix that file later on. In their example, they have a jail running a web server and another jail running a mail server. And so there's a public IP address definition here, and so you do a little packet normalization in the PF config, as well as setting the outbound connections from within the jails. So you do NAT on EM0 from LO1 networks to any outgoing via EM0. And the web server jail is defined at 192.168.0.2. So you do a redirect on EM0 protocol TCP from any to the public IP address that we defined earlier in the file on port 443, because we communicate securely, to 192.168.0.2. And this basically goes on for the rest of the file. And once you have that, now enable PF like this. Maybe check the syntax for the PF conf before you start PF. Otherwise, you might be able to not log in again because you locked yourself out. Or if it's not a proper PF config, then it won't start up. But just enable it by using sysrc pf_enable equals yes, which adds it to rc.conf. And then you start it with service PF start. And hopefully, if you have everything correct in there, your networking is still up and the jails can now communicate. So next up is installing EasyJail. So what EasyJail is a collection of scripts by Erdgeist that allows you to easily manage your jails, hence the easy in it. So you run a simple package install EasyJail, which will give you all the necessary bits to run EasyJails. And as an alternative, you could install EasyJail from the ports tree. Now we need to set up the base jail, which contains the shared base system for our jails that every other jail will pull down on or link to. And in fact, every jail that you create gets that base jail to symlink directories related to the base system, like /bin and /sbin. And this can be accomplished by running EasyJail admin install. And you do the next step by copying the resolve.conf file from our host to each new jail, because otherwise, or the new jail one, which in return will pull it into each new jail that is generated, because those jails will also need a way to resolve host names. So that's the template for newly created jails in the new jail directory. And to ensure that the domain resolution works, you copy this resolve.conf in there, and then each new jail will grab it. Last but not least, we enable EasyJail and started with sysrc again, EasyJail underscore enable equals yes, and service EasyJail start. So now that EasyJail is running, we can create our first jail. To do that, you run EasyJail-admin, give it a name, in this case web server, 192.168.0.2 was chosen as the IP address for that one, and then you run EasyJail-admin start web server. So that jail is now running. And you can access that right away using EasyJail-admin console web server, which logs you in, even though this might not have a networking yet, because the EasyJail command console will always connect you into the jail. Each jail contains a vanilla FreeBSD installation, so right from the install files that you have used to actually install the host. And next time, or the next step is to deploy the services in the jail. Now you can spin up as many jails as you want to set up our services, like a web or mail server or file shares even. You could take care not to enable SSHD within your jails, or you should actually take care not to enable that, because that would cause problems with the service's IP bindings. But this is not a problem, just SSH to the host and enter your jail using EasyJail-admin console. Yeah, this is a nice tutorial, and using PF you can basically use your one public IP address and internally route it to each individual jail.
Yep.
Pretty nice. Yeah, so thanks for that tutorial. And
the other bit of news, we can tease you with the schedule for EuroBSDCon 2018.
Yeah, excellent. That's actually something I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, the opening keynote is still a secret, but after that, we got Tom Jones is presenting hacking together a FreeBSD presentation streaming box for as little money as possible. I'm very interested in that. He has quite a bit of expertise in that area, and I very much would like us to have a bunch of little streaming boxes we can take to these conferences and live stream every conference. Mark Espy will be talking about advances in OpenBSD packages, and David Carlier and Camille Ratarowski are talking about LLVM and the state of sanitizers on the BSDs. Kirk McCusick will present the evolution of FreeBSD governance. Andrew Fengler, who actually works for me, will be presenting FreeBSD, what to not monitor. And Kristaps Johnson will be presenting OpenBSD and diving. That'll be interesting. I will be presenting how my company uses ZFS boot environments at scale as a mechanism for atomically updating servers remotely. Ingo Swarzi will talk about better documentation on the web and for LibreSSL. And Avandal will talk about fast, reliable packet filtering in NetBSD using Lua scripts. That's cool. You could do really interesting firewalling with the flexibility of Lua scripts like that. Baptiste Drazon will do his introduction of FreeBSD in new environments, similar to the one at BSDCan. Karsten Strothman will talk about the end of DNS as we know it. Seven Jalian will talk about what's in store for NetBSD 9. Michael Stanek will talk about FreeBSD on the ARM Power NV. So the Power 9 hardware has a native hypervisor. So you can actually run the IBM thing or FreeBSD as the hypervisor, and then you run multiple virtual machines on the hardware. So it's kind of hardware where virtualization is kind of in the hardware a bit. But you can run FreeBSD as the bottom underneath the the hypervisor kind of thing. So we'll be talking about that. Michael Voigt will talk about from Hello World to the VFS layer, building a badmin-like tool for Dragonfly's HammerFS.
Ooh, cool flag on Dragonfly.
Alistair Crooks will talk about changes, modern source code tracking and management for NetBSD. And that is just the first day.
Yep.
Then on the second day, we have a talk about NetBSD kernel bug roast to the next level, kernel sanitizers, porting S6, the startup tool, to FreeBSD as a PID 1. Bob Beck will present Pledge and Unveil on OpenBSD. Live patching the FreeBSD kernel. We've all wanted that for a decade or so. Then there's removing ROP gadgets from OpenBSD, integrating libfuzzer with the NetBSD userland, profiling packet processing, performance, and peculiarities, self-hosting an alternative to the public cloud. So if you want a cloud, but you want to do it yourself, Defora OS, NetBSD, and the future of the internet, multicast network testing, a presentation on the FreeBSD graphics stack by Nicholas Sizing, debugging lessons learned as a newbie trying to fix NetBSD, and then the FreeBSD VPC, a new kernel subsystem for cloud workloads, being a BSD user, and finally GN as a modern make replacement.
Followed by the closing keynote.
Yes.
Oh, wow. They've picked a very diverse schedule. So it's not just programming. It's also like security, porting. There's something for everyone, I guess, in there. That's well.
There's toolchain stuff. There's everything. And there are tutorials. So if you come on the Thursday and Friday before the conference on the weekend.
Oh, yes.
Advanced container management with libIOCage, managing BSD systems with Ansible, ports and Poudriere, libTLS tutorial for TLS beginners, an introduction to the FreeBSD operating system, or an introduction to BGP for developers and sysadmins.
Oh, yeah. I will be tutorials and giving one in the morning, as you saw, and doing the rest of this and the next day doing tutorials, visiting them and see what other people have to teach me, which would be an interesting concept. So yeah, go to EuroBSDCon, register, sign up, be there. It's better live than watching the recordings. Time for the news roundup this week. We have an OpenBSD on iBook G4. They haven't been around for a while, but it's possible to run it. This is over at bobstechsite.com.
Because someone wrote in that they had hardware like this, and they were wondering if they could run BSD on it. And the answer is
perfect.
Yes.
This is the exact item for you. And many others. Maybe there's still a couple of them around on eBay or in some basement or attic, whatever. Anyway. So they've mentioned on social media and on the BTS podcast a few times that they wanted to try installing OpenBSD onto an old Snow White iBook G4. Bob here acquired last summer to see if he could make it useful as a useful machine in the year 2018. Yeah, a couple of years late, but still it's a decent machine. So this particular eBay purchase came from 14-inch 1024 by 768 TFT screen, 1.07 gigahertz PowerPC G4 processor, 1.5 gigabytes of RAM, 100 gigabytes of HDD space, and an ATI Radeon 9200 graphics card with 32 megabytes of SD RAM. Remember, folks, we were excited back then to have this configuration.
Yeah.
But the optical drive, Ethernet port, battery, and USB slots are also fully functional. That's also important to have. And the important thing that doesn't work is the battery. But it's not unexpected for a device with that age that was originally released in 2004, so 14 years.
So it's just the BIOS clock battery, which is easy enough to replace.
Yeah, not a big deal. So the initial experiments go like this. This iBook originally arrived at his door running Apple macOS 10, Leopard, and came with the original install disk. The iLife and iWork suits for 2008, oh god, various instructions manuals that no one reads, a working power cable, and a spare keyboard. As you'll see in the pictures here, they look for this post. The characters on the buttons have started to wear away a little bit from 14 years of intensive use, but the replacements need very good cleaning before they decide to swap them in. So yeah, it's not too difficult, and you can see how the machine looks like, and you can still see which button has which label.
I don't know if you can hear. You can see what this is my spare keyboard that I use to try to type slightly more quietly during the show. But the keys have definitely deteriorated over time.
Whatever reason, you must be a Unix user. Control C,
Sorry.
maybe Control D, but yeah.
But yes, this keyboard is so old it was mostly from gaming, and Control was like crouch. But yes, Control C and V are used a lot, and Control T. But most of the wear you can see is on WASD because gaming.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay,
this is like 4 keyboards ago. I'm not sure why I still have this keyboard, but
nostalgia. So back to the article. After spending some time exploring the last version of OS X to support the IBM PowerPC processor architecture, they tried to see if the hardware was capable of modern computing with Linux. Something they knew ahead of trying this was what the Wi-Fi adapter was unlikely to work because it's a highly proprietary component designed by Apple to work specifically with OS X and nothing else, but they figured they could probably use a wireless USB dongle later to get around this limitation. So unfortunately, they found that no recent versions of mainstream Linux distributions would boot off this machine. Debian has dropped support for 32-bit PowerPC architectures and the PowerPC variants of Ubuntu 16.04 long-term support. Vanilla, Mate, and Lubuntu wouldn't even boot the installer. So the only distribution they could reliably install on the hardware was Lubuntu 14.04 LTS, the previous LTS version. So unfortunately, Bob is not the biggest fan of the LXDE desktop for regular work, and a lot of ported applications were old and broken because it clearly wasn't being maintained by people that use the hardware anymore. Ubuntu 14.04 also approaching the end of its support life in early 2019, so the limited solution also has a limited shelf life. Over to BSD. So they discussed the problem with a few people on Mastodon, the social network, and it was pointed out to them that OS X is built on a Darwin kernel, which happens to be a variant of BSD. NetBSD and OpenBSD fans in particular convinced him that their community still saw the value of supporting these old machines and that he should give BSD a try. And apparently yesterday, or at least from the blog post date, they finally downloaded the Mac PowerPC version of OpenBSD 6.3 with no idea what to expect. Okay, they hoped for the best but feared the worst because the last experience with this operating system was trying out PCBSD in 2008. Oh, that's not too bad, I guess. And discovering
what 10 years ago.
Yeah, so it's Unix, CP and LS are still there and doing the same thing. And
well, their problem was that it didn't support the hardware in their Toshiba laptop. Toshiba is never that big of a brand for Unixy laptops.
Yeah, and they discovered with disappointment that it didn't support any of the hardware. Yeah. So when it initially booted OpenBSD, it was a little surprised to find the login screen provided no visual feedback when he typed in his password, but can understand the security reasons for doing that. The initial desktop environment that was loaded was very basic. All you could see was a cursor, a console blinking, output window, a terminal, and a desktop switcher in the X11 environment the system had loaded. So after Googling a bit, he found a blog post that had fantastic instructions to follow for the post-installation steps. So that's linked in the show notes. You have to adjust them slightly, though, because the iBook only has 1.5 gigabytes of RAM, and not very every package that page suggests is available on the Mac PowerPC port. You can see the full list also in our show notes. That's the FTP listing of OpenBSD. And the final thoughts here is that he was really impressed with the performance of OpenBSD's port for the Mac PowerPC. And it boots much faster than OS X Leopard actually on the same hardware, and unlike in Lubuntu 14.04, it doesn't randomly hang on for no reason or crash if you launch something demanding like the GIMP graphics editor. He was pleased to see that the command line tools he used to using on Linux have been ported across too, or they were originating from BSD in the first place. But OpenBSD also had no issues with them performing basic desktop tasks on XFCE, like browsing the web with NetSurf, playing audio files with VLC, and editing images with the GIMP. Limited gaming is also theoretically possible if you're willing to build them, or an emulator from source with the SDL support. And if you wanted to use the system for heavy-duty work, then you'd probably be inclined to run key applications like LibreOffice on a Raspberry Pi, then connect the iBook to those using the VNC or SSH connection with X11 forwarding. BSD is Unix after all, so using the ancient laptop as a dumb terminal would work reasonably well. So in summary, they were impressed with OpenBSD and its ability to breathe new life into this old Apple Mac. He's generally excited about the idea of trying BSD with other devices on his network, such as an Asus EEPC 900 netbook, and at least one of the many Raspberry Pi devices he uses. Wherever he goes, the whole hog and replace Fedora on his main production laptop, though, remains to be seen. Okay,
it mostly depends what the laptop is, whether that will work out nicely or not. If it's a Lenovo, it will.
I wonder about the battery life for this one.
On the Mac, it depends how badly it's been treated and if the battery's ever been replaced. But yeah, a 2004 laptop, the battery is not going to be.
Yeah, not the best one. But yeah, for home use, that's where a power connector is readily available. That's not too bad. Okay, nice story. So last week, remember, we read a blog post, and apparently that blog post was so well received that not only on Twitter, but that the author, Mariusz, our good friend here, wrote another one, the template user with PAM and login.
Yeah, so it says, when you build a new service or an application, you need your users to be able to configure it from the command line. To accomplish this, you can create system accounts for all registered users on your service and assign them a special login shell, which provides such limited functionality as just being able to configure this one service. This can be painful if you have a dynamic user database. Another challenge is authentication via remote services such as Radius. How can we implement services when we authenticate through something like Radius and log in as a different user? Furthermore, imagine a scenario where Radius decides on which accounts we have the right to access by sending additional attributes. So, to address these two problems, we can create a template user. Any of the PAM modules can set the value of the PAM user item. The value of this item will be used to determine which accounts we want to be able to log in. Only the template user must exist on the local password database, but the credential check can be omitted by the module and then authenticate with one of the users from the remote database. So this function exists in the login function used by FreeBSD, Hardened by BSD, Dragonfly BSD, and Illumos. This functionality doesn't exist in the login used by NetBSD or OpenBSD because they don't support PAM modules. In addition, it is also noteworthy that such functionality was also in OpenSSH, but they decided to remove it and call it a security vulnerability in CVE 2015-6563. I can see how some people may have seen it that way, but that's why I recommend reading the article from the OpenPAM author and a FreeBSD security officer at the time explaining how it actually works. But knowing the background, let's take a look at an example.
Mm-hmm.
So here we have the PAM SM authenticate function. And what it's going to do is get a user, get the authentication token, and decide who can log in. So it says, in the listing above, we have an example PAM module. The PAM get user call provides the username. The PAM get auth token shows
Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Multispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah Show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour. To be a part of the program, it's a free call, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624, or send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalai. I am your host. Delighted to be here with you this hour as another episode of the Ask Noah Show kicks off. Kyle joins us from Georgia. Hey, Kyle, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hey, Noah, it's Lyle, but that's okay.
Sorry about that.
I got a question. I want a new desktop, and I don't know, the colors and the audios doesn't seem quite as good as it does when I dual boot into Windows.
Okay.
If I bought a Dell that was specifically designed for Ubuntu, they got a Precision, or if I bought a System 76, would the colors and the audio be better with the onboard stuff?
So I guess to answer that, so here's a couple of things to consider when answering a question like that. So regardless of if you buy the computer from System 76 or Dell or Lenovo or HP, the reality is there's only so many companies that actually make the components that go inside the computer, right? So Intel makes the same i7 8700K that goes in a Dell Precision that is in an HP workstation. Or is the same chip that you would buy if you were building a computer outright yourself, and certainly the same chip that System 76 uses. So it doesn't, as far as is one going to work a little better, or is it going to function any better, or are you going to get better performance, is essentially kind of what you're asking. The answer there is no. Where you will notice some difference, Lyle, or where it may be beneficial to you is Dell, for example, will check a video card and a audio card and a motherboard and make sure that all three of those things work together flawlessly. And so let's say you're watching a video, the audio syncs up, the video syncs up, everything is smooth, everything works together, all of the drivers work. All of those things happen because you have a manufacturer that is paying attention to those things and making sure that everything works. And you won't have that if you're just hodgepodging it together yourself. And so that's where the advantage of buying a Dell or System 76 would be. As far as those two specific brands, is there one better than the other, or is there one going to give you better performance? Absolutely not. I don't think you're going to see a better picture quality or better audio quality in a System 76 over a Dell, or a Dell over a System 76. What you might find is that the customer support, the treatment of you as an individual rather than just a customer number from a place like System 76 is probably going to be better. And the profit margins as an ability to swap parts or to offer you free service or even a free replacement or a free upgrade is probably going to be better at a place like Dell.
Okay. They have a precision that you can get with Ubuntu. Dell does.
Okay.
But say I wanted an Optiplex. Would it do any better? Would one work better with Linux just because they offer that one with Ubuntu, the precision over the Optiplex?
So all of Dell's hardware with the
better, I mean better video, better audio.
Sure. Yes, the answer to that question is yes. Certainly a hardware-enabled system from Dell, that is Dell's stamp of approval that Linux is going to work on the system, and absolutely that will work better than a system that isn't hardware-enabled. However, there are only 2 computers that I'm aware of, neither the Dell Optiplex or the Precision. It's some weird esoteric model that is used in a specific industry. All of their mainline stuff is hardware enabled for Linux. In other words, if you go buy a Dell Optiplex or a Dell Precision, Dell tells you they officially support Linux on those machines. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Dell Optiplexes sitting underneath my feet that are powering this show right now. And they all have Linux. They all have Windows 7 stickers because I didn't purchase them with a guarantee that they would run Linux. I just happen to know that all Dells do. They are all hardware enabled for Linux, and they run great. I've never had a problem with any of them. And this studio has to run whether or not I'm here because I do 50% of the shows from the road, right?
Cool. Oh, one other thing. I met Jeremy 2 years ago at Self, and he talked about how busy he was on the podcast. He stopped and talked to me for 15 minutes. He didn't know who I was. He's a great guy.
He is. He's a fantastic guy.
It was really nice. He stopped to talk to me.
Yeah, that's
on the show, Noah. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Thanks for calling in. I appreciate having you. That's one of those things that I have to give credit where credit's due to Jeremy Sands, the director of Southeast Linux Fest. He understands that the community that we live in, this is a individual community. It's not a corporate community. The reality is, we talk about as content producers all the time, like how could we do a show or how could we cater our content to the bigwigs, the people that are the big corporations and the big companies and the people that work for the big companies and the big corporations and stuff like that. And the truth is, over time, I think what I've come to see is the human connection is way more important than stuff like that. The human connection, the ability to treat individuals as individuals and respect and care about their needs, that's a far greater calling and a far better way to serve the community than trying to cater to some corporate place that, in reality, they don't need some podcaster to tell them what to do. They've got a corporate training thing that shows them what they need to know for their job, right? So, and that's kind of how I've kind of, I don't know, I guess restanced, I suppose is the word, if that is a word, after chatting with Jeremy and following his example of putting people and the human connections above everything else. Chaz calls from New York. Hey, Chaz, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Noah, how's it going tonight?
Hey, man, great. How are you?
Pretty good. I had a 2-part question about something that I'm sure you've probably had talked to death at this point, but I'm sure you've heard the word on the street is that Valve is coming up with some way to run Windows-based games natively within Steam OS.
Right.
And I was wondering what form you thought that would take, if you thought it would be a wine compatibility thing, or if they would come up with their own homegrown solution, or if they would just kind of like get all the AAA game manufacturers together and try to promote some sort of unified standard. And the second part of my question is, obviously, as we heard just a few moments ago, you are Linux first, but we can always trust you to give a fair and balanced assessment of what Linux is actually capable of doing and what it isn't capable of doing. So at what point do you think Valve gets to a point where gaming on Linux, besides Free Doom and DOSBox and things like that, gets the Ask Noah Show stamp of approval?
Sure. So that is a great question. For those of you that haven't caught up, and we'll have a link to the Engadget article in the show notes, Valve is essentially, they're trying to build some tools so that you can run Windows games on Steam machines. So the problem that Valve is having right now is Valve makes their money they want to make the next Xbox. They want to make the next PlayStation. They want to make a game console, but they want that game console to run PC games. And the idea is you can buy this game once and you'll be able to run it on your laptop, on your desktop, on your gaming PC, and you'll be able to run it on your living room console. And the problem that they keep running into is that all of the AAA game manufacturers are not porting their games to Linux. They're running them on Windows. And Valve, for obvious reasons, doesn't want to base their infrastructure on a dying operating system. And so they have restructured and based SteamOS off of Linux. And so now how do we get those games on there? Well, what they're working on it. I guess the answer to your question is I believe it's some modified version of Wine based on the limited research I've done. And I'm not a gamer, don't play one on TV. But I was just having this discussion with a friend of mine last night, and his speculation, and it is just that, speculation. So don't take this to the bank, just speculation, just an idea, pie in the sky idea, is that Valve and Google may end up teaming up on some of these things, because as we talked about on the show a couple of weeks ago, Google is also announcing a game-type box that they are going to release, but Google's box is going to be cloud-based gaming. So the idea that you could play a Google game inside of a Chrome tab, whereas Steam obviously has an interest in having hardware in the home. But those two, you could see how those two could work together. If Valve wanted to design the box or work with a hardware manufacturer to have the local box, and then Google could be the game service, you could see how those two things could come together. Of course, all of that means that both manufacturers have a vested interest and a lot of money in getting games to run on Linux, right?
Definitely, yeah.
Perfect. Hey, Chaz, thanks a lot for the call. I really appreciate it. Also, just a heads up, we have a T-shirt headed your way back from the July T-shirt contest. So those are supposed to arrive this week, and then we'll have them shipped out. So if you want a T-shirt and you're wondering where it is, I believe they are coming in this week, and we'll have them shipped out by Friday. Lou calls us from Connecticut. Hey, Lou, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hey, Noah, how are you?
Good, man. How are you?
Pretty good. So my question is in regards to Core Boot and Libre Boot. I just wanted to get your thoughts on how necessary do you think it is for someone who values freedom and uses Linux. I try to keep all my stuff offline. I use KeePass instead of LastPass, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, should I be using all computers with only Core Boot and Libre Boot, or does it really not matter that much?
Here's the way I've always approached that, Lou, and that's a great question. I love it. The way I've always approached stuff like that is I divide things into hierarchies. Hierarchy number 1 is, does it run on Linux? Hierarchy number 2 is it open source? Hierarchy number 3 is it Libre respecting, or is it freedom respecting? And so the way I approach some of this stuff is, in a perfect world, yeah, absolutely, it's very important. I absolutely think that the microcode that is executed on our motherboards should absolutely be open source, should be public, and that we should care and try to move towards a society where we own and understand the code that is running on our computers. There have been instances where the federal government has worked with either PC manufacturers or shipping manufacturers to intercept computers and inject malicious code at the BIOS or EFI level. And so that's not conspiracy theory. Like, that's proven. We know that has happened. And Lenovo has willingly participated in some of that. And participated in loading software on the BIOS so that when you reinstall Windows, it automatically reinstalls this, crapware on your system. And so there's absolutely a concern for it. There's absolutely a reason to care. My issue is the problem I run into is I have some pause at worrying about what is happening at the microcode level, and if it's a Libre boot system versus just the regular Dell UEFI system, until we get something like, Adobe Premiere on Linux. Which one of those battles do we want to fight? Because it's fine to say that we're going to take a hard line in the sand and everything better be Libre respecting. I can respect that. If that's you, you have friends on this show. You're perfectly accepted here, and I want to have that discussion. But do I think that, or would I want to see people spending their time, effort, and money on advocating for a Libre boot system while we still, we're going to talk to a gentleman later today, and he's having a difficult time doing some of his graphic design stuff on Linux because some of the software doesn't exist on there. And so where would I rather see us spend our time? Well, I would rather us solve the big problems first. Get the masses, get the people and the software over to Linux. And once we solve that problem, then we can start working on open source solutions or making or replacing proprietary software with open source solutions. And then once we've solved that problem, then that to me seems like the appropriate time to have the discussion of let's worry about the microcode at our boot level. that happens, for 3 seconds when we start the computer up, right?
Yeah, no, I agree.
But if you,
I just had one follow-up question.
Yeah, please.
Oh, sorry. Just because I'm okay with my computers now, but I just worry about the future. Like, I firmly believe the money I'm spending should be going to something that I believe that I support. Should I be looking more at the Purism laptops, who I know they do support the core boot at least, or should I look at something like a Dell XPS, which I've used before, and it's
Right.
great. I mean, I know you guys talked about it before. It's definitely a premium you're paying for the Purism, and it almost sends the wrong message to Dell. It's like, okay, well, Linux users aren't going to deal with this anyway, so screw them.
Exactly.
I want my money to go towards making things better, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Man, you really nailed the head. There's a GIF I've been using. It's this board coming out, and then there's a hammer that hits the nail, and it's just this nailed it. If I could give you that GIF over the air, I totally would. Man, you really hit the nail on the head, man. The issue there is, you're right. Dell right now is testing the waters. They're saying, is there a market? Are the Linux enthusiasts, are they willing to put their money where their mouth is and buy an $1,800 computer? If we take the top-end computer that we offer, we don't even offer it with Windows. If all we offered it was with Linux, would the Linux community step up and buy it? And by and large, the answer to them so far has been yes. And then they doubled down on it and said, okay, well, you bought the laptop. Let's make an all-in-one desktop that makes the iMac look like a Fisher-Price child's toy. And they released the XPS all-in-one. And that took off like wildfire, and people are buying them right and left and saying, this is the end-all be-all for media production. And so as a user, it's absolutely important to vote with your wallet and to let the market forces show Dell that, yes, there is a market out here, and yes, we are willing to buy it. And I know Barton George personally, the guy who is in charge of the Linux on Dell, and he is fighting the good fight, as it were. I mean, he goes into his office managers, sits down in a board meeting, and they'll ask him difficult questions like, what do you expect the sales on Linux on Dell to be? And he'll give them a number, and then they laugh and say, well, we get that in our Windows sales in one state alone, or something like that. I don't remember exactly what the quote is, but the point is that the market, you're starting at a small market. So to further divide that market, and we as Linux users, we never miss an opportunity to tell manufacturers and to tell software manufacturers to pound sand. I remember when EditShare brought Lightworks to Linux. That was huge. The first time that we had professional grade $20,000 video editing software, and they were willing to give it to Linux users for free. And the first question when they launched their new form, the first comment, the first discussion was, well, if it's not on Fedora, I'm not going to download it. But they better put an RPM out. That's the kind of stupid but things that we as Linux users, we respond to after this company takes a gamble out on us. And you can understand why at some point these manufacturers look up and they're like, listen, that's just a rat's nest we just don't want to get into. We don't want to bother porting our software to Linux, and nobody appreciates it anyway, and everybody's mad all the time, and no matter what we do, it's never enough. So I think that the change starts with us. The first thing we do is we take what manufacturers have done, we show thanks for it, we reward them for it. It's like Pavlov's dog, right? They do something good, we give them a treat. They do something better, we give them a bigger treat. And we just continue that response. And I think naturally, these manufacturers, Dell doesn't care what they make computers for. They don't care if it runs Windows. They don't care if it runs Linux. Heck, they don't care if it runs Mac OS. If Apple wanted to port Mac OS to Dell computers, Dell is in the business of selling laptops. The software that goes on top of it, they could care less. Now, to a certain degree, if you can have a lot of people that are more happy with a Dell product than a Mac product because the Dell that's shipping with Linux is more reliable, is more secure, is more stable, and it makes developers happy, that's a win-win-win for Dell. And so it's one of the reasons that when we went down to Dell and chatted with them, one of the first questions they asked is, how can we use Linux to produce media? Because right now, Apple kind of owns that market, and we want to get into that. We know we have a better physical product. We need the software to go with it. So what can we do? And that's the kind of discussions that are occurring. And I thank you very much for the call, Lou. Did that answer your question?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was so helpful. If you, I know you got some people's ears at Dell. If you can ever mention, if they can add core boot support and somehow neutralize ME, I'd be at 20% sold. I might be sold already, but Just something to think about. So thank you so much, Noah.
Awesome. Yes, thank you for the call. I will. I'll pass it up the chain, and we'll see if anything comes from it. But yeah, and I didn't mean to get off on too much of a tangent or a rant, but that's kind of where I break down on that. I think we need to do a better job of conquer and divide, figure out where our goals are, and then concentrate them and laser-like focus on each goal as we knock them out. And once we knock out the first goal, then we'll move to the next one. John calls from Arkansas. Hey, John, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Oh, hey, John. How's it going? I'm using Exerbo Linux, and I'm trying to run Call of Duty World War II on it, and it's not working. Do you know how to fix that?
Are you trying to run it natively or through Wine?
Yeah, I'm trying to run it natively, but it says the exe doesn't recognize it.
Sure. Yeah, no, and so the reason for that, John, and I thank you very much for the call. The reason for that is that Linux, the exe uses something called PL code, and PL code is what Windows uses to execute essentially code. That's how the machine interprets code. Linux does not interpret PL code, and so the computers that or the software that runs on Linux obviously has to be written specifically for Linux, and as is the software on Windows has to be specifically written for Windows. Now there are things like Wine and virtualization that allow us to cross-run software. So for example, if you wanted to run Call of Duty in a virtualized environment, you could use a PCI pass-through, and you could actually run a graphics card natively on Linux and be able to pass that through to Windows, and you would have near native performance. So, and I thank you very much for the call. It's a great question. Glad to see a new user getting started on Linux. One of the things that we did is I have been buddy of mine, and I started a podcast, and we're talking about news and stuff like that. You can check more out at podcast.theschmidtshow.com. But as part of that, I have gotten to know this guy and his family. And as we kind of got to know each other and hang out, one of the things I said, I'm really passionate about this open source stuff and this Linux stuff, and are you guys interested in taking a look at this stuff? And so what I did was I set up an Ultrabook, an Asus ZenBook, which is it's a really nice Ultrabook. I mean, that's one of the, if you're looking for an Ultrabook, and we were having a discussion on which Linux laptops to buy, that's a really great one. Because it has a lot of the same build quality features as a MacBook, and yet it runs Linux perfectly. And so set that up with KDE, Kubuntu 1804 to be specific, and gave it to this guy, and he didn't have a whole lot of interest in it at first. He said, yeah, I don't have a lot of time. I'll play with it a little bit. But my son really likes technology, and so do you care if he'd probably be a lot better at digging into it than me. So his son takes over the laptop, and he starts playing with it, and it takes off. He's like, this is great. Everything works. It's fantastic. Here are some of the pitfalls, but for the most part, I really like it. Well, fast forward about 5 days in, maybe a week in, somewhere in there, all of a sudden his dad comes back and says, yeah, well, my son has now taken over that laptop, but I have also started to really like Linux, and could we replace my MacBook with Linux? And I said, yeah. So now we're in the process of doing that. So joining me in the studio is Mr. Kenny Schmidt, Brad's son. Hey, Kenny, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Hey, yeah, I appreciate having you here. So I guess here's what I'm interested in. So you are how old?
I just turned 17, so young.
Okay, and still in high school.
Yep.
And what's interesting is you actually attend high school on your computer.
Yes. Yep.
So you attended it's like an online high school kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yep. It's through Adobe. I can't think of the actual. It's Adobe. It's one of the Adobe products.
Okay.
But it's basically a virtualized classroom where they have programs where you can raise your hand digitally, and it notifies the teacher and all this stuff. So it's got all that kind of stuff, and it's pretty intuitive, and it runs pretty nice. Yeah,
that's fantastic. So I say all of that, or I bring all of that up to exemplify the fact that if there's anybody that you live on a computer right now. Your job, so to speak, is on a computer, and then you have a part-time job as a graphic designer.
Yes. Yep.
And so all of these things exist on a computer, so you know your way around a PC pretty well.
Yeah.
And traditionally, you've been a Mac guy, Windows guy.
For the most part, I've been doing all my stuff through Windows. For me, Mac it's a little bit closed. I can't change a whole lot, and Windows has been kind of buggy. So I kind of like the idea of this Linux that it's got some flexibility and some customizability with a little bit of, you know, performance, and you get the performance and the reliability that something like a Mac would have. So off the bat, like just initial impressions, I've already really enjoyed some of that aspect of Linux in itself. Other than that, yeah, it's absolutely been Windows for me, and that's about it. But this is definitely something different.
So your dad brings this computer home. He says, "Hey, Kenny, I've got this computer. It runs this Linux thing. Check it out and let me know what you think." So you pull it out, you turn it on. What's your first impression?
Okay, so the first thing I did was I went and I downloaded Chrome, because for me that's what I've used. That's where everything I like is normal. So I went and I downloaded Chrome, and I went to Google Chrome's website, and I hit download and install, and I go in and I hit install, and it says, you know, install package and all this stuff, and it's very different than your typical Windows install. It's not, you know, run okay. It's got, you know, you can actually see the terminal doing all the code and, you know, reading out in front of you, so you actually get some feedback of it. And I thought, oh, that's kind of strange. And so once I got Chrome installed, I kind of go through with all my computers as I get them, as I go, okay, so all my stuff that I'm going to use on them every day, you know, I'm working on a project in Corel, so I'm going to have music, you know, so I can work and listen to music. So I go, okay, so let's go Spotify, because that's what I use for all my music. And I go and I look and I go, I get to Spotify's website, and it auto detects that I have a Linux machine. So it goes, okay, you can't download a native installer like you can on Windows or Mac, like you can normally. And I go, okay, well, this is kind of strange, and I'm not 100% sure on this. But actually, me and Noah had met up for we had a competition shoot that he was trying out, and kind of he's trying some of my interests, I was trying some of his. So we kind of traded back and forth. So as we were meeting, I had kind of asked him about this topic of, you know, how do I, you know, what's the best way to get some of these like basic programs that I was like really, you know, I couldn't figure it out quite right away. And he showed me this website called Snapcraft.io, which is, as he's probably talked about on the show before, is really a simple way to get, I'd say 90% of your average everyday apps. Just easily update, the quick updating, the reliability, the easy install, literally just typing in and like even on their website, they have their copy and paste install that you literally just copy it, open the terminal and paste it in, and it loads. And it works. The programs themselves aren't like a dumbed down light version. They're all full-fledged programs. So that's what I did. So once I got all that in, and I really started to like that. And like he suggested Inkscape, which is their like a really good vector program for Linux, and I tried that, and I was kind of thinking, well, it's missing some of the tools that I need. I use like power tracing tools for, you know, outlining things, and the Inkscape program had some of that, but it also did it in it did the same thing but in a different way to that I'm used to. So I was kind of talking to him. I was like, hey, what's the best way to get this Chrome thing? I don't see it on the Snapcraft website. So what's the best way? And he had kind of said, you know, Wine, VirtualBox, and dual booting was kind of the solution.
So, and this is this is to get Corel Draw on the computer.
And they do have. He did say that they had Corel. I believe it was Photo Paint is their other one.
What is the? I have to look that up. What is the Corel photo editor?
It's similar to Photoshop, is what I believe it is.
Right. Yeah. Paint Shop Pro.
Yeah.
So Paint Shop Pro is available actually on the Steam Show.
Yeah, on the Steam store. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, and that's the one we looked at, and I wasn't. I believe that's more similar to like Photoshop, whereas the actual draw program that I use is similar to Illustrator, Adobe Illustrator, in the fact that it's a vector versus a raster program. So really, just scalable art versus, you know, pixelated art.
Right, and so what you're doing right now is we're in the process of setting you up a virtual machine. You're going to use the virtual machine to do some of the just so that you can, because the thing is when you're switching, and this is what I kind of talked to you about on Telegram a little bit. When you're switching to Linux or when you're getting started with Linux, that's not the time to just interrupt your work, right? Let's get the work done first, and then in your free time you can say, now I wonder if I could do that thing
in something Inkscape. Like Inkscape,
But it gets super frustrating when, like, you were trying to work on this graphic, and you're like, I have to get this logo done for this client, and now I'm sitting here trying to find a tool in Inkscape like that. It's just not a good way to work.
Yeah, for sure.
So what we're gonna do is we're gonna finish setting up that virtual machine, and that will get you back on Corel Draw. And you'll be able to get your work done. And then over time, I'd be interested, because one of the things you said that I think stood out to me is, Kenny, you said the way that Inkscape interprets the pen is the closest that you've seen as compared to any other software that you've tried, including Adobe Illustrator.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I've used Illustrator and some other vector programs, and you get a very specific feeling for how the tools individually react and respond, and how they just work in general. The feeling of when I pull the cursor this far off into this direction, it's going to make that shape this long, or it's going to bow out this much, and Inkscape has been the only program that I've tried that has had a similar feeling and kind of felt at home for me with their just general tools that they had. And it's the closest experience to what I've seen in Corel. But there are those minor things of like some of the tools, but like for the most part, I would say Inkscape comes closest to what feels like at home and natural for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested as you continue to go through, to have you to stay in touch with you and just kind of see how that process goes, and especially, there are other programs that do some of those same things, like we were talking about Krita earlier today.
Yeah.
Very good for free-handed drawing and stuff like that.
Painting tools. Yep.
Right. Exactly. So if you start working on and going kind of down that road, I'd be interested to see what your take on Krita is. And then also, and I mean, I was kind of half joking about it, but in all seriousness, if you ever found yourself with some extra time, if you got into some of these softwares, would you ever be interested in creating tutorials for people to say, for the next generation of people that want to learn how to use this stuff?
Absolutely. I think there's, especially in the field that I work with a lot of other designers at my job, and having something that I, even just on a personal level, say one of my coworkers, I've heard this a lot, especially in the industry I work in, people, when they first start working there, they automatically, the first thing they want to learn about is graphics, because it's a cool field. I mean, people are genuinely interested in it right away. And if I had, the time to sit down and once I learned something like Inkscape, a free tool that people can just download and install, and they don't have to, they don't have to buy a license to this program, and they can just install it on any computer, and they can just start learning and see if they actually like it. That is something brilliant. And if I could create, once I learn these programs like Inkscape and what was the other one? Krita,
yeah.
Krita. If I could actually go through and, once I learn these programs, create something where they can follow along. A lot of the people that I've helped kind of teach some of the Corel Draw and graphics and stuff for, I literally had them sit down and watch a YouTube video on like a multi-monitor setup. I'll pull up my art program on the main monitor, and I'll say, here on the second monitor, have this YouTube video up, and this is what I used to learn this program from. And really the best way to learn like an art program is literally just sitting down, watching a tutorial and following along and physically doing it, because that's, at least for me, I mean, some people do learn differently, but I think if I had, created a tool like that so like even some of my coworkers, say they were interested, I could say, hey, download this Inkscape program and watch this tutorial I made, whatever in my time, and they could get started right away, and we could have, an extra designer on staff now.
Right.
They can do more than one thing. They have some extra variety of stuff.
So, and I want to dig into that just a little bit. So one of the things that we get on this program all the time is people ask me, they say, how do I get a job? Or how do I get hired? Or how do I do this, that, or the other? And you, at the time, I guess you were probably 15 or 16 years old, have managed to figure out what people 40, 50, and 60 years old can't seem to figure out, and that is that if you can just make yourself more valuable to the employer than they have to pay you, it's a foregone conclusion. They absolutely want to hire you. So tell me the story. How did you get your job?
So my dad actually works for a radio station, and one of the people that advertises on the radio station had basically has a graphics company, and at the time I was really interested in graphics. So my way of finding this graphics company was my dad, but just the best way to find, like, say, a company you're looking for is just go look for a place that does what you do, and if it's not exactly what you want to do, find something that's close, and then go there and like just try it and see if they'll let you learn. What I did is I literally went to this company and I said, hey, I went to the guy who owns it, because it's kind of a small company, a small town, and I said, hey, can I sit in and just learn what you do and try it out, and I don't care if I have to go get your coffee and do the crap,
just let me exist
just
here.
let me be here and learn about this. And as I went, I learned I did some of that, and even doing it on your own in your own free time. Like, I go home when I was done there and pull up a YouTube video on how to do artwork for Corel or or Inkscape or whatever program you want to use.
Yeah. That's what they were using. So that's
just what they were using, and that's what I learned on.
Yep.
So I basically said, okay, I'm gonna learn as much about this as I absolutely can. And I'm gonna try my hardest to just impress this guy every single time when I come in and I go, hey, I learned this thing. And sometimes you'll even get really lucky and you'll learn some cool thing that even they didn't know. Mm-hmm. And I was able to show him. I said, at the time it was I think it was like an opacity tool or a way of using it to make a cool effect.
Sure,
and I was like, hey, check this out. We can do this. And he's like, oh, that's really cool. I really like that. And basically over time I had learned some of this graphic stuff. But this company, they don't do just solely graphics. They do graphics and apparel. So they do the actual creation of they'll do your logo for your company and they'll do your clothing. They'll do it all.
And then they send you on a trip.
Yeah. They also own a travel company, and that's kind of a second branch. So really the thing is I'd learned as much as I could. And then once there was an opportunity that arose as soon as I could, before me, there was a guy that had ran their machines, their embroidery machines. So he was a machine operator, and I believe he was going back to school is why he couldn't continue to do it, because he just had to be focused more on school. So, and this is college, not like high school. So he went off to college and he said, I'm not going to be able to run the machines. And since I had been there learning about, the graphics and all this other stuff, I basically, my boss said, hey, would you like, if you could run these machines, which you've been sitting here and learning for the last couple weeks and months, and you've kind of learned about all this stuff and how it works. Hey, how could you do that for me? Because you're the only other person I know right now. Otherwise, I'd have to go find another person that can do this stuff and have to train them in and take all this extra time. So the way I kind of look at it is I tried to start to build as much value as I could at that company before I was even employed. And even if they didn't see the value in having me at that company, and that boss never said, oh, hey, I want to hire you on to do this, then I at least learned from that company.
You were getting experience.
I learned about it, and I found my education in doing that myself. And
you didn't pay, and you didn't have to pay for the education.
This was 100% free. All it was making the offer, going up to someone and saying, hey, I see you have this really great thing going on here, and I see that I could learn something great out of this.
And I want to be a part of it.
And I want to be a part of it, and I want to learn. And it was something that I was genuinely interested in.
So I want to see if I can just sum this up just a little bit. So it was who you knew, because you were paying attention to the connections around you, and said, here's somebody that's doing something I want to do, and I know I found the shortest path to that thing.
Yep.
You made yourself more valuable to that company than it would cost to pay you.
Yes.
And then really what it was preparation met opportunity, and that's what created success, right? Because so just being always willing to work and being there and being available meant when that opportunity came up, you were the first guy because you already had your foot through the door because you're already there working for free.
Yeah. And like I say, and it's something that I love doing too. So it seems, at least for me in my case, it seems like I'm more willing to work harder when I enjoy what I do.
Right.
So putting that extra time and just going in and learning about it didn't feel like work. It felt like going and just doing something fun in my free time, because it's summertime and I got 3 months to kill with nothing to do. So why not go do something productive?
So that's a lesson for all of you that are out there. If you're listening and you're wondering what you can do to get your next career started, take some advice from the 17-year-old kid, because he's figured it out, So thanks a lot for joining me. I appreciate having you. Obviously, you're going to stick around for the rest of the episode. So if there's anything you have a view on, by all means, your mic's on, speak up. But yeah, we would be interested. I'd be very interested in hearing the continuation of this. Hearing where your journey goes, hearing the kind of software and the kind of things that you use and what happens, and how we can be a part of that and become a part of that success. And so, we'll upgrade that. We'll upgrade the laptop for you. We'll get a bigger SSD in there for you, because I know what kind of your needs are now, and we can kind of tweak that a little bit. And then it'll be nice, because it'll kind of be passed down, because once we get everything all finalized on your dad's MacBook, then you'll be his first line of support, because, hey, guess what? You got 2 weeks on him, you know?
I had the same stupid, simple questions beforehand that I can now help him with. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so, and then we, it's fun too, because, you had another buddy that we were all out at this trap club.
Yeah,
Not that it's necessarily related to this show, but you're somewhat of a child prodigy when it comes to trap shooting, right?
Thank you.
You won that competition that we were at, but then you were also you've competed at the state level.
Yeah.
And you got what was your exact place?
I can't remember. I know for the most part, it's ranked on teams. So for the last 3 years, our team has taken first through second place. So the first year we were there, we got first place. Second, third year we got second and second.
But
place
there's
again.
hundreds and hundreds.
and there's hundreds. And I believe I know for a fact I was in the top 50. I can't remember. I think it was like something like 7-way tie for 20th place.
And when people say that, they say, "Oh, it's 50. That's not so much." But the difference between 50 and first place is like one target or whatever, right?
Yeah, it's a very small. Like I think it's a total of like first place to like 20. I believe it was 27th place is what I got. So I think I think it was like 6 targets.
Yeah. Sure.
27 positions and it's 6 targets.
Right. And this is over hundreds and hundreds of targets that you shot. Well, very good. And like I say, you're a great guy, and it's great to have you here in the studio. I'm happy that you're able to take the time to be here, and you offer a very interesting insight for me as a Linux enthusiast, because there are not a lot of people that have grown up in the same circumstance that you have. So a lot of people, they are predisposed because they grew up on Mac and on Windows. And my kids, for example, they're given Chromebooks. And so my son, everything in his life revolves around Chrome. And so on his laptop, obviously he's got Linux, but he wants to do everything inside of Chrome because that's what he's comfortable with and that's what he knows. And so to have somebody that did not necessarily participate to the same extent in the public school system, but at the same time has a very high-level technical background and does a lot of these things at a younger age. Obviously, that has some that I think that provides a lot of insight. So I'll be interested to follow that to see how it goes. And for sure, as you learn these tools, I promise you, there are people out there that would love tutorials on taking your artistic ability and combining with an ability to say, how can I take these open source tools and how can I make them valuable to other people? Without, again, giving back to that community, without having somebody has to contribute a cost,
Yeah, for sure.
Again, open phones, 1-855 450 NOAA. It's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. EFF.org headline: telling the truth about defects in technology should never ever be illegal. Ever. Congress has made a new law saying that Congress has never made a law, saying that corporations should get to decide who should publish truthful information about defects in their product. The First Amendment wouldn't allow for such a law, but that hasn't stopped corporations from conjuring out of thin air and defending it as though it were a natural rite of passage. Some background: in 1986, Ronald Reagan, spooked by Matthew Broderick movie War Games, worked with Congress to pass a sweeping cybersecurity bill called the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, commonly known as the CFAA of 86, that was exceedingly sloppily drafted. The CFAA makes it a felony to exceed authorized access on someone else's computers in many instances. Fast forward to 1998, when Bill Clinton and his Congress enacted the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, commonly referred to as DMCA, a giant gnarly hairball of digital copyright law that included Section 1201, which bans bypassing any technological measure that effectively controls access to copyright works or trafficking in devices or services that bypass digital locks. Notice that neither of these laws have bans on the disclosure of defects, including security disclosures. But decades later, corporate lawyers and federal prosecutors have constructed a body of legal precedents that twist these overburdened laws into a rule that effectively gives corporations the power to decide who gets to tell the truth about flaws and bugs in their products. Businesses and prosecutors have brought civil and criminal actions against whistleblowers who violated company policy and terms of service by discovering the defect. The argument goes something like this: our terms of service ban probing our system for security defects. When you log into a server for that purpose, you exceed your authorization, and therefore you violate the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act of 1986. To say that I have a huge, massive problem with this is a gross understatement, right? Because the issue here is that if it was just the company's data that was at stake here, if it was just their resources that we were talking about, fine, do whatever you want. You make whatever policy you want. The problem is that these kind of policies and this kind of quote-unquote protection is put into place at places like Target, at places like Walmart, at places like the local gym, and those places have my personal credit card. And so if there is somebody there that understands the technology, oftentimes better than the people who actually implemented it, and they're able to find problems, why in the world do we support a law structure that penalizes those people for bringing those problems forward? I had a gentleman reach out to me earlier this week and said, I work for a company and I am trying to navigate some of these waters because there is a massive security flaw. It's causing a problem with customer data, and we need to do something about it. And could you at Altispeed Technologies help me facilitate this and help me figure out how we can fix this problem? And by the way, don't get me fired in the process. And I didn't have a great answer for him. And it kind of frustrated me that I didn't have a great answer for him, because the truth is, legally speaking, there is no legal protection for trying to fix your company's broken system. And in fact, oftentimes, if you point out a problem, the company is more likely to come after you for pointing out the problem to begin with than they are to be thankful for the fact that you're fixing their problem, that you're doing their troubleshooting, that you're fixing holes that should have never been there in the first place, and was highly irresponsible of them not to have paying somebody to fix this stuff. And we don't do a good enough job of that, and we don't do a good enough job of recognizing that. And it's one of the reasons I'm so thankful that organizations like the EFF exist, because the EFF pays attention to this stuff. The EFF pays attention to the fact that there are organizations that don't. We were talking earlier in the hour about, is Libra respecting important? Is Libra software important? The EFF is paying attention to those kinds of things to make sure that the government follows step with this stuff, to make sure that when the government goes to get a bid for something, that they're not violating the principles and rights of people. And they don't treat the digital rights of people different than your physical rights. I've talked about this on the program before. I've used this example before. If you were going through an airport 50 years ago and you had your camera and you were suspected of some crime, and as part of being suspected of that crime, the police confiscated your camera, took the film out, got it developed, and maybe they looked inside of your 20 or 30 pictures to determine if in fact you had committed this crime or if you were at the scene or whatever it is, right? If you were, then, they used the evidence against you. If you weren't there, well, they looked at 30 of your photos and you moved on your way. Think about that in 2018. Think about what happens if, for any reason, law enforcement takes your phone out of your possession and goes through your Google photo library. They're not going back 30 or 40 photos. They're going back, in the cases of my kid's life, everything they've ever taken a photo of since the day they were born is in their Google photo library. And the police can get access to that, government officials can get access to that because they got a warrant, because they got a judge to sign off on it. And yet we don't enforce that sort of policy the other way around. Nobody says, hey, Mr. Law Enforcement Officer, hey, Mr. Judge, hey, Mr. Lawyer, you wanted to find out what my client was doing for the last 30 days. You just went through the last 25 years of his photos. That's exceeding your authorization of access. No, we don't have any of that when it comes to the private citizen. We just have that as protection for these large, massive companies, for these large, massive corporations. Those kinds of things we're happy to protect. Those kinds of things we're happy to go to the mat for and say, you know what? You didn't have the authorization to click on that button and found out that you got access to Susie B's credit card information and her social security number and all of this. Nobody talks about stuff like that, but we're always quick. We never miss an opportunity to tell a citizen to pound sand if they, run into some of these issues and their rights are abused by the federal government or any, organization for that matter. Target gets breached, right? Nobody ever looks at the protection of the citizens. In fact, a lot of times, particularly in the case with the Equifax breach, a lot of these places actually have you sign disclaimers or waivers when you sign up for their identity theft protection, the identity theft protection that you only needed because they screwed up. When you sign up for these things, a lot of times, as part of that agreement for them to give you the free identity protection, you waive your right to a lawsuit with these companies, which is ridiculous. They don't protect your data. They fire people who try to protect your data, and then they come after you for the cost. They get you to sign away your rights to sue them just so that you can not be further harassed by people stealing your identity because of their security breach. LT Guy 005 in the chat room says, I told a principal at my daughter's school that if any student finds a way to hack into the computers, into the computer lab that are locked down, punish them by making them maintain or work in the computer lab. Well said. We had a guy on the 1 year anniversary of the show. We did it live from Minneapolis, St. Paul. We did it from the Tamarack Tap Room. It was a great time. Had a lot of guys and girls come out to hang out with us and celebrate the 1 year anniversary of the Ask Noah show. One of the things we heard, because there was a lot of educators there, one of the things that we heard from every educator was that we have a problem in this society where we punish kids. And we tell them from a young age, don't try to do that thing. Don't try to access that thing. Don't try to break that thing. Don't penetration test that thing. If we're doing our jobs right as system administrators and as developers, there should be absolutely no concern about somebody knocking on wood, because you're not going to break anything because we've done a good enough job of securing it in the first place, right? 1-855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. You can email us live at AskNoahShow.com. This comes to us from ARS Technica. Headline: a review of Monitor IO, a little gadget that wants to talk to your internet. Monitor IO is a $100 IoT gadget that tells you whether your internet is working properly or not at all. The idea is simply that you put this black box plugged directly into your router into a quick glance, and it has a color-coded screen that will let you know if your internet is working solidly or if it's having some problems or is just plain out. Monitor IO promises to tell users granular details like how long a connection has been up, sketchy or not. I'm a very senior sysadmin with a hand-configured Linux router and a panoply of tools ranging from NetData to NTOP, NG to Nagios and enterprise-like wired and Wi-Fi access point systems. Despite all of that, Monitor IO manages to offer me useful insights into my internet connection and local network that I didn't have and would be pretty difficult to duplicate. For a $100 IoT gadget, that's pretty impressive. Now, you guys know, for the most part, I don't particularly care for IoT gadgets. You guys know that for the most part, I don't like cloud stuff. But this is pretty cool. This is pretty cool because when I call my ISP and I have questions or I have problems, the first thing they want to know, how long has the connection been out? How long is the connection working? Has the connection, what time did the connection, they want all of these details. And a certain amount of that is because they literally can't fix the problem if they don't have it. Other times I get the distinct impression that they are just trying to, basically they're trying to push me off. They're basically trying to say, we don't care. And if we just ignore you, eventually you'll go away. And there are plenty of software alternatives that have existed for a long time that, but a lot of them ran on Windows, that people would use to try to talk to their ISP. Comcast is famous for this. If you don't have specific data proving to them that there's a problem with their system, they will pass it off. I've heard of some instances where they will actually tell you if you don't have 3 or more people in a given area reporting a problem, they won't even send a technician out to fix it. So the idea that you can plug this box in and start to gather that useful network metrics that you can actually use for troubleshooting your own internet connection, that's huge to me. The other thing is just the ability of knowing that my internet is out versus do I actually have a network problem in my house? Is the Wi-Fi down? Those kinds of things are remarkably useful to me. Now, here's the truth. The truth is that I have 3 internet monitors. I have to feed them and clothe them, but they are addicted to their tablets and Netflix and YouTube and all of that stuff. So the internet doesn't go out at our house for more than about 6 seconds, and I start hearing about it with 3 very loud alarms telling me that the network is experiencing high latency and that I need to resolve it immediately, right? And the nice thing about those network monitors is they're mobile. They will come to whatever room you are and notify you, and they don't require an internet connection either. They work right on the LAN. But the ability for this device to monitor your internet connection just with a color thing, I can just look over and see that the internet connection is poor because the color is purple, or the internet connection is green, so it's perfect, or it's red because it's totally out. That is super useful to me. I can't imagine if I lived at a place where I didn't have very good internet, if I lived in an RV, or I lived out at a lake, or I lived out where I had satellite internet or something like that, how useful it would be to just look at a box and be able to look at the color and know, oh, the internet's doing good, or the internet's not doing good, or whatever. So, not a big fan of cloud devices, even less of a fan of IoT. It comes with my usual Ask Noah show warnings, which are, if you're going to plug a box like this into your LAN and forget about it and just look at the colorful lights, keep in mind There's a little computer in that thing. That little computer can be compromised. That little computer needs updates. So time will tell if this company is actually issuing updates to these things and is being responsible about keeping them secure, or if it just becomes a wide open gate on your network, especially for the fact that by the very nature of the device, it can't be VLAN'd off. It can't, I mean, it literally has to exist on your, at least it has to have a pipe to the world. I guess you could put it in its own VLAN and then just trust that that VLAN is connected. All your VLANs are on the internet. But for the most part, despite all of the standard, usual Ask Noah Show warnings, I think this is a cool device. I will be picking one up, and I'm going to check it out. And not sure if I'll stick with it. I somewhat suspect that there are probably some open source alternatives to this that I could just make out of a Raspberry Pi. But I have used the little ping indicator on Arch long enough to know that having a consistent internet connection meter is an important thing. We'll definitely be getting one here for the studio, because knowing what the internet here is everything, right? If we don't have an internet, we don't have a show. We got the FM show, but we don't have a show. So I have to be acutely aware of what the internet connection is. 1-855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. You can email the show live at AskNoahShow.com, or you can join our interactive Mumble Room, mumble.jupiterbroadcasting.org. Change the last port number to 4 and join us in the on-air channel. Scott does that and joins us in Mumble. Hey, Scott, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hi, Noah. How are you?
Hey, excellent, man. Man, your audio sounds great.
Thanks. I just had a question about, well, it's kind of a multi-part question. So,
sure.
I have a couple of domains with Namecheap as my registrar, and when I signed up for them, it was real cheap, and they had some basic DNS services and stuff like that. It was real nice. But as far as like the actual like registering your domain, what are you actually paying the registrar for? Like, what is the yearly subscription for?
Sure. So when we look at domains, domains read from the right backwards to the left. It's kind of backwards, right? So for instance, the very ending domain is com. And then from com is separated by a dot, and then is your name, and then separated by that is a subdomain, and separated by that is another subdomain. So for example, I do some contract work out at the University of North Dakota. My UND email address is noah.chalaya@und.nodac.edu. And so there's a lot of subdomains in there, right? The very last one, the one at the far right, is what's known as a top-level domain, or a TLD. A top-level domain is something that all DNS servers can resolve or understand. So for example, if and I'm just making this up because there are a lot of top-level domains, so maybe this does exist, but .asknoahshow.com, or no, .asknoahshow is not a top-level domain. So if I made a website that was www.asknoahshow, that wouldn't resolve because DNS servers wouldn't know to recognize the top-level domain Ask Noah Show. So there is an organization called ICANN that organizes all of the top-level domains. Traditionally, they have been .com, .net, .org, .biz, but in recent years, we have expanded that out to be .io and .ninja and .sam and .whatever, right? And so we have a lot of these. And so that's what you're paying for, is you're paying for ICANN to tell all of the DNS servers, hey, this .scot, for example, I'm sure that's probably one. .scot is a valid top-level domain, and so if anybody has .scot, here is the DNS server you look at to resolve .scot addresses, and then that DNS server then resolves, my website .scot.
Okay, and that's kind of where my question starts. Is like, so where do we go from paying the ICANN to paying GoDaddy or Namecheap? Like, Where does that come from?
So you could decide to be a registrar, and you could register all the paperwork and all of that, and you could sell then domains registered to Scott's domain service through ICANN. You could totally do that. But GoDaddy, and I use Register for Less, Namecheap, all of these, they work with ICANN to facilitate between each other so that only one person can own, obviously, something.com, right?
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Is there... So you can have any registrar then, as long as they can interact with ICANN?
Correct. Certain registers do not support every domain, top-level domain. So, for example, Register for Less, who I love, they only support like 6 top-level domains. And so all of the rest of them, I use Gandhi because Gandhi supports every top-level domain under the sun. They are insanely cheap. They support privacy, and their renewal system is amazing.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the thanks for the Mumble question. Mumble.jupiterbroadcasting.org. You too can join the conversation. Domains are an interesting subject, and domain names are an interesting subject. There was a time back when we started Altispeed Technologies. One of the reasons that I went with the name Altispeed, it was actually a name generator. And I don't know if I've ever told the story on the air, but it was a name generator. It was a website that generated basically business names based on a number of criteria. And so the criteria that we were looking for back in 2009 when we started Altispeed Technologies was we wanted something that ranked well in the yellow pages. Because back in 2009, people still used phone books to call for IT services, and we cared. Today, that obviously is not so much of an issue. But so we cared about our yellow page listing. It looked at what was available, what Twitter handle was available. It looked at what .com was available. And based on all, it looked on what Gmail address was available. And based on all of those things, and also based on what we had for our what we were trying to sell. So we were trying to sell, at the time we were working with a speaker manufacturer called Sunfire, and we were working on fast networks and fast Wi-Fi and stuff like that. And it combined the Sunfire, Altis, which is Latin for sun, with the network speed that we were trying to push, speed, and we got Altispeed, and altispeed.com was available and all of that. Now, these days, I look at some of those things and I go, well, today it probably wouldn't matter, because even if altispeed.com doesn't matter, altispeed.io is available. And these days, you can almost get a top-level domain that fits whatever you're doing. So the race car guy can have altispeed.races, and I can have altispeed.tech, and we can have that same namespace, and we can have somewhat of a name collision, but it doesn't necessarily conflict because they're doing two entirely different things. Token Ring in the chat room says, I'm sorry, who was it that asked? Somebody asked, Deppensv asked, is Gandhi able to offer in Thunderbird? Well, Gandhi is just a name registrar. Where you check your email or where you host your email is totally your discretion. Now, if you want really good mail hosting, I would check out Fastmail. If you want free mail hosting, check out Zoho. It will do a lot of the things that Gmail will do, but it won't cost you anything. Hey guys, did you know this episode is available as a downloadable podcast? That's right, to subscribe to the feed or download the latest episode, visit podcast.asknoahshow. There you'll find not only the latest episode, but all of the articles and materials referenced in this episode. You can get the latest, of course, by following us on Twitter, @AskNoahShow. The Ask Noah Show continues next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. A huge thanks to Vox Telesis for providing our phone systems, Ben, our producer, Sarah, our call screener. This hour of the show may be over, but there's plenty more content for you 24/7 at AskNoahShow.com.
Project, the Sway developers were some of the first people to come and join the discussion there.
Right.
So there's been good collaboration between the Mir team and the Sway team, and also the Wayland developers. And it's important to emphasize that Mir is an active project, and it has a lot of momentum behind it. William's a recent member at Canonical. Very talented developer, and I think you'll be hearing some more interesting news from him in the weeks and months to come.
Yeah, I noticed that. I would be interested to chat with William in the future. It seems, it seems like he joined a few months ago, and
he joined around the start of the year. I met him earlier this year, and he came from the Arch community. He's the second guy I've met recently who's been recruited into Canonical from the Arch Linux community. Yeah,
poaching some of the best. All right, I got a question for Wes and for Brent and for you too, Wimpy. So I'll start with you, Wes. Say you're going to sit down at a computer how do you know if that computer is fast enough for your work?
Well, this is on Linux Unplugged, so is it compiling the Linux kernel?
No, I think for you personally, like your workload, how do you assess a computer's potential? Say somebody gives you a laptop. Like this happened to Brent when Brent was out here during Linux Fest. I just gave him the Librem 15. I'm like, here, do your photo work, Brent. And like, how do you know?
Good luck, right?
Yeah. How did you know if that computer, I mean, other than it's a fairly modern computer, how would you know just looking at it if that computer was capable enough of being fast enough for your workload?
Yeah, I think for me in that specific case, it certainly helped that I was surrounded by a bunch of people that I knew wouldn't put up with slow machines. So it turned out that for my workflow, it was fine. Especially that I didn't have a laptop while I was in the US. So any laptop was going to do fine. But to answer the question a bit more broadly, I think for me there's a set of work loads that I do typically on any computer, multiple times a week. And so if someone's going to give me a laptop, I'm going to do a set of workflows that I'm so familiar with. I know just sort of intuitively how long they should take or how they should perform or how snappy they should be. And, that workload is going to be a little bit different for everybody. So I'd be interested in hearing everyone else's thoughts or methods, but that for me is tried and tested.
That makes sense.
A true way of doing it.
So Wimpy, you and I have experienced this in another context as well, and that is getting review systems in for the Ubuntu podcast or for this show, and you have to sort of assess this machine's capability. So do you have a couple of go-to methods when you sit down at a Linux box to try to assess, okay, right, how fast is this system?
When we do our reviews on the Ubuntu podcast, we usually revert to benchmarks in popular games as the means to determine how fast it is. Most of the feedback we got from our listeners when we were figuring out how to review hardware, the things that they were most interested in was what's the battery endurance like? How hot does it get? How noisy is it? What's the quality of the screen? How good is the keyboard? So much more practical things about, the portability and utility of the device. And performance doesn't come up very often as a thing that they're interested in. So we have a few games that we run through as an indication as to what the performance is like.
Right.
Personally, when I assess the performance of a device, it really comes down to compiling and building software. So when I'm doing work stuff, it's building snaps, and they're usually large snaps because I work on some complicated stuff that, I don't get to talk about here. But also, when I'm compiling and building packages for the Mate desktop, I know how long those things take, and those are the things that I would say are the most CPU intensive things that I do.
Yeah, okay. I think that's a good way to put it. If you have a workflow that you're really familiar with, like the pace of it, because it's just something you've done a lot, and then you sit down on a machine, you go through it, you do get a good sense. I saw the chat room was throwing things out like how much RAM does it have, the CPU model. Those are like what I used to use. Oh, does it have 32 gigs of RAM?
How many Electron apps can you open at one time?
Yeah, exactly.
That's my benchmark.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's part of the RAM thing. But it feels like modern systems are a little more complicated than that because especially with laptops, you've got thermal throttling to consider. You've got your base clock plus turbo, depending on if it's something that pings one core versus all of 4 cores. So there's...
Right. And there's also responsiveness versus throughput and what's more important for how you're going to use that system.
I bring all this up because this week Blender has reintroduced, and I say reintroduced because this, if you have used Blender in the past, was something that was available in the past, but they removed it. It's back now in a big way. It's a benchmark, the Blender benchmark. They've built the Blender benchmark platform with a maximum focus on transparency and privacy, they say. They use only free and open source software, GNU GPL software. Everything that is all testing content is public domain, so it's all licensed as public domain, and the test results are being shared as anonymized public data. So this is really exciting, and I wanted to use this as another opportunity to point people over towards what I think is Michael Arbel's really good work at openbenchmarking.org. The Open Benchmark tool, which is available in your distro's repository, is amazing. You download this package and you install it, and then when you run it on the command line, there's GUIs available as well. It comes up and says, "What do you want to test?" And it's everything. It's everything from it will download a game in the background, run it, benchmark it. It's everything from it will download different versions of the Linux kernel and with different compiling options and benchmark them and generate the same charts.
Impressive.
It generates all those charts that you see at Phoronix are all created using the Open Benchmark tool. The other thing it does is it uploads the benchmark results to a community comparison site where there's like 23 million different benchmarks that have been posted that you can compare your system against. Now, only like 1.6 million of them are public. You can choose to keep them private and just compare against your own systems. It's so fun to just run a system through this and really give it like just a beating. And like he's stayed on top of getting things in here. Like Linux 4.18 kernel benchmarks are already in there. So you could, even if you don't want to run 4.18, like you don't want to switch it out on your distro, you could use Open Benchmark to download, build it, and do some benchmarking. Like that's pretty neat. There's also Blender tests in there. There's entire workflows from photo workflows to development workflows to gaming. And it's a great way to just download this on your box, run your system through a set of paces, and get real numbers out of it.
I like that you have things you can actually compare to and, you know, a certain amount of standardization there. So you can know that other people are running this, you can run it on the same thing, and you don't have to be an expert in trying to set it up to have a good suite of tools there.
Yeah, and you know that's it's a nice thing because it's constantly updated, so they're constantly changing it, and you don't necessarily know every test to run. Say you want to stress test the I/O subsystem, like you want to just bash on the disk subsystem and the network subsystem, and you really want to stress those two things. You could put something together, or you could use scripts they've already created that will run it through its paces, and it's just like that at every level, including encryption benchmarks, packaging. It's just great. And if you're ever wondering how to really kind of get an assessment out of a system, take a look at it and run it against that. I'm almost wondering if I could look into it. Maybe I should try to figure this out. If there's a set of numbers we could generate it so we could compare different laptops over the years as we review them to see how they perform. So we could have like a chart of the fastest laptops.
It seems like we could definitely do that.
Yeah. That'd be pretty good. Kind of like a leader chart, you know, that we could use, that we would always run the same standard Open Benchmark on. It'd be the results would be public, so people could audit them if they wanted.
Yeah, maybe a link back to the episode so you could hear the review of the unit.
They could benchmark their own systems against it. It might be pretty fun. It's like doing laps around a track with cars and then
Jupyter benchmarks.
Anyways, moving on. I thought that was pretty neat, and I wanted to give them a plug because it's a great way to see what your system's capable of, or get a sense of a new box, which I'll be doing maybe in the near future. A couple of mentions of some events that are coming up. First up is the Libre Application Summit, poorly named LAS. Just going to let that hang for a second. Why they got to take that? Why they got to take LAS? Why they got to do that to me?
That's
it's an affront.
I mean, you gave it up, man. You walked away.
Actually, they took it before the show was even over.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Well, that's just...
You know, the bell's getting popular. A lot of dings today. But the nice thing is they just posted their early event calendar. So you can get an idea of what's going on at the Libre Application Summit. And I think Eric, the IT guy, is going to make it down there. You think it's a lock, Eric?
Yeah, it is a definite thing. I've got my ticket. I'm volunteering with the GNOME engagement team, and even going to shack up with one of the System 76 guys who's got an apartment not too far from there.
Nice. You can give a high five to Daniel Foray too. He'll be there doing a talk about the Elementary App Center.
I'm hoping to catch both his and Cassidy's talks.
Oh yeah, Cassidy's gonna be there too.
Super exciting.
Oh, nice. All right, so you can be you'll be our Libre Application Summit correspondent. Report back with what you discover. All right.
I would choose to accept that mission.
Good man.
It's not an impossible mission. In fact, it's the best kind of mission. So I think this gentleman's name we're going to talk about now is Benno? B-E-N-N-O. Benno? Yeah, that's okay. Benno had a talk at BSDCan 2018 that was a few weeks ago. It was back in June, and it was titled The Tragedy of System D. And he says, System D, to put it mildly, is controversial. Depending on who you ask, it's either a complete violation of the Unix philosophy, a bloated pile of bugs, a complete violation of elegant simplicity, or all of the above. And he starts a talk that really got my attention. I'm going to play, it's a 30-minute talk. I'll play about 3 minutes of it. But I will link it in the show notes where you can download the slides and you can watch the entire talk. But it caught my attention. I decided to share it with the class here because he brings up something that is not even related to Linux. It's not related to systemd. I think it's something we all do as tribal animals. We do something to sort of show our allegiance to a particular tribe or group that brings down other people. And I think we're probably all guilty of it.
All right, so I would just like to initially thank everyone on BSDCan for inviting me to speak in front of all of you lovely people. And in full understanding and acknowledgement of that thanks, I would like to present a live reading of Bedazzled by Blockchain by Michael... Sorry, no. George Neville Neal could not be here, and it wouldn't feel right doing this without him. Which is a tragedy. Link. So I came up with the name of this talk around the same time that I came up with the first sort of rough idea of it, and it seemed to fit really well, especially when I went to Wikipedia and saw that, you know, tragedy is a form of drama based on human suffering that invokes an accompanying catharsis or pleasure in audiences. And I figured there was plenty of drama and humor and suffering to go around in systemd, and so I figured that it was a good way to go. Another thing that really came into it when I was developing this talk is this piece by Oren Shaw called Contempt Culture. It's a really interesting piece, and it's kind of confronting sometimes because in a lot of the communities that we're in, part of the way that we show that we're in the community is by heaping shit on the other communities. And that kind of sucks. You know, your Python developers heap crap on the Perl developers, and the Perl developers heap crap on the PHP developers. This piece is very focused on language stuff, but we kind of do that too. And so I highly recommend that everyone reads this. And the other thing that I think goes into this discussion is the notion of change. Change threatens a bunch of things, the most obvious being familiarity. And familiarity feels really comfortable because it's the thing that we're used to, but occasionally it's really good to reassess what the familiar and decide, you know, whether we need to change it or not.
I felt his comment there about how we sometimes, as a group, will throw shade on another group to sort of show that we're in with you. Like, I think the way you think. I think that's a really common behavior. And what he's talking about, obviously, is how the BSD camp has been really disparaging towards systemd. That's really what he's addressing in this talk. In fact, he starts to, over the next 15 minutes, he starts to sort of set the audience up. And mind you, this is a room full of free BSD developers. The graybeards of the graybeards. In fact, in one of these clips, you'll hear Alan Jude in the background if you listen really carefully. And there's some coughing and some hacking because some of them are a little bit older. And as I cough and hack. And he's trying to convince them that they're already on this path. He starts to go through the history of Unix and shows how the very early init tools have now morphed from just getting the system up to mounting file systems, starting network interfaces, and doing much, much more. And after this point, he starts to mention that these complex tools are beginning to create the need for a system layer in FreeBSD. So you have the user layer, the system layer, and the kernel layer. Which systemd essentially introduced a system layer to Linux. User space, system space, kernel space. And he says we may need something similar in FreeBSD. In fact, we're already kind of on our way.
But the thing is that dynamic stuff is often better managed through user space than it is through kernel code. And I think that Windows natively understood this from the beginning. macOS definitely understands it. With systemd, you actually understand that there's a layer in there in the middle called the system layer, which I'm calling the system layer. And so systemd implements that system layer for Linux by bringing in a bunch of code that manages various system functions like network connectivity, time, device management, and all that kind of things that just don't necessarily belong in standard user space, but also don't necessarily belong in the kernel. So, and the thing is that on top of that, it doesn't really do it in a way that everyone finds familiar, which I think is part of the source of the angst to it. But it does give you an explanation as to why it sees the need to bring in things like network manager code, udev, time, resolver libraries, because all of those things are systemic services that are getting provided to user space. So how did that work out?
And then he goes through and shows the history of systemd adoption. He dives in a little bit to Lennart's history with, it turns out, Lennart Pottering, the guy that created systemd and was its primary advocate, was at odds with management. Management wasn't all that big on it. They had made their choice. They were perfectly happy with how it was functioning in RHEL and didn't really see the point in systemd. And he said, no, trust me, let me show you. And despite pushback from his own management, he continued to work on it, which is an interesting part of this clip. And then he starts to get into some of the most common complaints about systemd. Like one was just mentioned in the chat room, it runs as PID1, and he has a response to that. But the number one complaint systemd gets, especially from the FreeBSD camp, because remember the audience here, is it's just not damn Unix-like.
Moving through the rest of this section, I kind of want to look at some of the complaints that people have about systemd and just sort of address them a bit. Number one, there's a lot of suggestions that it violates the Unix philosophy, which I usually take to mean that you want to write software that does one thing and does it well and then connect it to other things. Systemd as a project contains a lot of things. Systemd as a daemon is a thing that reacts to events and starts things and does it very well. And so you could claim that it does not actually violate the Unix philosophy. You could claim that there's a bit of violation in that it's bringing all of this extra functionality into the project, but I think for BSD projects to criticize another project for bringing a bunch of tangentially linked software into one repository to manage it collectively, that's a bit rich.
I think that might be one of my favorite parts right there. It is a bit rich. And he says there is also the issue of Lennart's personality. It is something that seems to have triggered a bit of the reaction. I think that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the communication aspect and how you go about that is a big part of growing and trying to get adoption for a project like systemd.
Yeah, that's it.
So open source communities are fun places. Ask me how I know.
How do you know?
Is it July 4th yet? So Lennart Pottering looks like an interesting guy in a bunch of ways. Lots of people don't like him, and I can kind of see why. He tends to wade into a place with a bunch of ideas that he holds very strongly and then somehow actually manage to get them implemented and delivered and in your face. And if you don't like them, it's very hard to get him to change his mind. The thing is that I've just described a whole lot of people in open source.
Yeah.
One thing I think you have to admire about him is that he does actually get this stuff done. I mean, for someone to show up to his management and say, hi, I want to rewrite init, and I think we should do it like this, and for them to go, no. And for him to go, no, just wait. And to actually go do it, and to have it be so successful that it spread outside his own project into a whole bunch of other major Linux projects, I think that actually is quite impressive. The other thing that I saw is that there are a bunch of cases where he's dealing with bugs where he does actually remain incredibly polite given the amount of stuff that's being thrown at him. There's a famous bug where it looked like systemd was misparsing a username that started with a digit and using the digit, which was 0, as a user ID. And it turned out that it was actually not being read as it was being interpreted as an invalid username. And there's a long discussion about the validity of usernames. And while it does get quite rule lawyery at points, he never goes into name calling. He's never calling people idiots. And that, when you're facing that kind of stuff, is quite admirable given the amount of things like death threats he's got over this, which is not cool.
I'm wondering, Wimpy, if you have any reaction to his comments about the typical open source personality there and about how sometimes that causes some of the reaction to their proposals?
This is a really well thought, well reasoned presentation. I'm gonna go and find the full thing and have a listen to this later.
I will have it in the show notes for sure.
Yeah. What a great speaker. On that point, yes, I mean, there are always stereotypes in communities, right? And definitely those people exist, and anyone who's a leader in any sphere, including open source, can in some respects be put on a pedestal and held up and celebrated by sections of the community. But if you have strong beliefs and you want to set a project in a particular direction and you have conviction behind that, there will be another group of people who don't subscribe to your philosophy, who will resist, what you're trying to do, and that will manifest itself in lots of different ways. But I don't know necessarily that that's open source. I think that's people.
Behavior.
I think the difference is yes, it's human nature, and I think one of the things is because open source and free software, all of this stuff plays out in the public domain, the public sphere, then we see all of this interaction happen and all of the fallout and all of the, the drama that goes along with it. So, we're just a microcosm of humanity in that respect.
Yeah, it's fascinating that it infects everything we touch. We just mess it up.
Yeah, we have more access and we're maybe more passionate about it too, and we just like to talk.
It's to me also a data point in where this conversation is now in the FreeBSD community, because one of the things that's I enjoy is if you can go back through the history of this show. In fact, I would really just be extremely flattered if somebody took the time to make a YouTube playlist or sent me links of all of the episodes from our past where we covered Systemd from essentially its initial idea to the end of the Debian drama and then Ubuntu's adoption. I would be fascinated to know what episode series that is, because I would love to be able to make a playlist, like a one-off feed.
That was every episode in 2015.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it was just, but my thought along the entire time was, well, what the hell are the FreeBSD guys going to do? Because I could see what Systemd was trying to solve. And so now this to me is a data point of where they're at in this conversation. And it's taking them a while to get here. But he ends the talk on a couple of really strong points. And there's even more in the full talk. I'm not giving a full spoiler here. There's more good stuff in the talk. But he ends on a warning to FreeBSD users: don't mock Systemd and don't recruit around Systemd.
Mocking Systemd is the wrong attitude to take. It's not the kind of sad thing that Linux people have to deal with and how sorry we are for them that they have Systemd. We should be looking at going, why did they choose to do that? And what I really find problematic is using Systemd as a recruiting tool for BSD. I don't think that should be done at all, because when you think about the kind of people that we would bring across, if we were to say, come to BSD, we don't change. Or come to BSD, we don't have Systemd, but we've just come up with a really good idea for something that works like it. I don't think that those are the kind of people that we don't want to bring that attitude into our thing. And what I said we should be doing instead is asking, why did they see this as necessary? And the thing is that if you look at it like that, if you don't see it as, those poor Linux people with their terrible init system, and go, hang on, they just did that and I don't understand it. Why did they do that? What did they see in it? That means that we can then look at that and start to find things that we can get out of it. The other thing to be careful of is the next generation of people, the people that come after us, they don't think the way that we think, necessarily. A lot of the people who are now coming into IT and software engineering, they're so much more used to APIs, and not library APIs, remote procedure call APIs. They grok things like containers in ways that may seem quite unfamiliar to us. That doesn't mean that containers are bad, and it certainly doesn't mean that containers are something that should be mocked. I heard someone describe Kubernetes as the POSIX of the cloud. And while that may sound ridiculous at first, I think it's a scary thought when you think about the fact that we can't run Kubernetes.
Ain't that true?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, obviously, because it's not my area, but that is a big thing. That whole point, don't mock Systemd, don't recruit based on that, because if you bring in a whole user base that resists change, then it's going to hurt the project. That's really insightful and true for all projects.
The Linux community need to take a leaf out of this presentation. The message that's delivered here about critical thinking about why a project or why a person or why a distribution has made the choices and decisions that they've chosen, rather than just shitting on it for the sake of shitting on it because you're not in the camp of that distribution, is a very, very positive message to take away from this. Within the Linux community, if you're not running Arch, or you're not running, Slackware, or you're not running KDE Neon, there's this group of people that will criticize your choices. And this really needs to stop, because if we're Linux users, it really doesn't matter what distribution we've bought into. We all agree on the fact that Linux is, for our purposes, the best operating system available, and we should not be throwing shit at one another over details. Because we look like a bunch of arse-hats from the outside.
Yep.
And it's utterly destructive, because the amount of energy that goes into all of this negative, product is pointless. It would be far better to have, if you don't agree with what a project's doing, as this guy's just said, ask yourself, well, why did they do that? What was the reasons that drove them to do this thing? Maybe try and understand where they're coming from, because there might be something in that. Maybe you don't believe in that particular technology, but as a technology direction, you can see some value in it.
Yep. I completely agree. Perfectly said.
I would love for this to be held up as an example of critical thinking in open source and how not to sling shit at one another, because we really need to cut that nonsense out.
And we can all be better, right? If we can productively learn, they'll take some ideas that they like, add some new ideas, and then we can learn from that in the future.
And it's a high level perspective, and I think that's the perspective that gets the work done. And I loved it. I thought it was a great talk, so I wanted to share it with you guys, and we'll have it linked in the show notes, linuxunplugged.com/262. And I'll tell you this, after listening to that, I had been on the fence. I've decided I'm going to go to meet BSD in California, October
Exciting.
19th and the 20th. I'm going to be down there. It's going to be at Intel's campus.
Oh.
How cool is that?
Heck yeah.
You should consider coming with me. I bet you we could make that drive in one day.
Yeah, I think we're up to that challenge.
We could run down there. We could do a tech snap.
BSD on.
Get our BSD on. Hang out with Alan Jude. Record a tech snap, and then we can make it back up here. It's at the Santa Clara Intel campus, and it's going to be on October 19th and 20th. I'm going to go.
Let's do it.
I think after hearing that, I'm like that is exactly the message. That is exactly the message we all need to be taking in, and it's that atmosphere which is going to be conducive to open source development. Plus, it'll be good to see Alan.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was pretty great. And you can find links to all of that in the show notes. Now, I also want to talk about Dropbox this week, and just a cool temporary workaround, even if you're not a Dropbox user, something that's just a neat trick you could do to hide stuff on your computer and all kinds of other things. So let's take a moment and thank Ting for making this episode possible. Linux.ting.com is where you go. When you go there, you'll get $25 off Ting service if you bring a device, or $25 off a phone. Ting is smarter than unlimited. If you use less, you pay less. The average Ting bill is just $23 per month per phone. It's just a fair price for however much you talk, text, and data you use. That's it. $6 for the line, which is great if you want to have a couple of family lines or a backup line, or if you're a small business and you need 25 lines. It's great. And they have nationwide coverage, CDMA and GSM, no contracts, no quote-unquote agreements, nothing weird like that. And you're in control the entire time. You can always see your usage. You can change different individual aspects of your service, like just turn stuff off if you want. You can set usage alerts as well. And Ting's not in it to try to push an app store or a music streaming service, so they don't really have an agenda of how you use Ting. So they don't have to push down like a Ting experience with a Ting image with Ting branding on your phone. And they don't really care if you just never want to use a text message ever. If you do everything over WhatsApp or Telegram.
You mean they'll send my text if I want, and otherwise they don't care?
They don't even bill you for it.
How does that make sense? Wow.
I know. I guess that's how it works in some other places in the world.
We are so backwards.
Not here in the States. I wanted to point out, if you need a phone right now and you don't have $1,000 to spend on a note, why not look at the GS5 Plus? Or I'm sorry, the G5S Plus. It's the Moto G5S Plus for $254. You would own the phone outright when you go to linux.ting.com, because it's normally $280. But when you go to our linux.ting.com, you get it for $254, unlocked, multi-network, 2 gigahertz octa-core Qualcomm Snapdragon processor, 5.5-inch IPS display, 3,000 milliamp battery, and it also has an SD slot, so you could put up to 128 gigs of micro SD into it for $254.
That's a capable phone right there.
No contract, nothing. And it's just a clean Android experience. And you just pay for what you use. Start by going to linux.ting.com. Oh! You know what I wish I did? I wish I had like a good, like an old classic Kyra clip. I feel like some classic Kyra, but I don't think I have any classic Kyra loaded. I don't.
That was just poor planning.
I do have, look at this though. I have classic Brent loaded in here. That's interesting. That's good. I got that set up. So if we ever need some classic Brent, I could always pull that in. That's nice. That's good. What else do I have in here? Of course, I've got Richard, but I digress.
He's taking a nap right now.
Now, let's take a moment and talk about Linux Academy, because today is a huge day for Linux Academy. I'll get there in a moment, but go to linuxacademy.com/unplugged and sign up for a free 7-day trial. It's a platform to learn everything about Linux and all of the stuff that runs on top of Linux that you want on your resume. And it's a great time to sign up because they've been adding a ton of content. Really working like crazy on this stuff. And there's things they have in the works that I'm not even supposed to tell you about. I know. Shh. I can't help it. So I'll tell you about something that's a little public. There's no getting around it. Today, Forbes released their fastest growing startups. And it's like, you know, at a they narrow this list down to 5,000 companies in the United States that are just growing like crazy. And Linux Academy is on the list.
Whoa.
They're on Forbes' 5,000. And out of 5,000, Linux Academy is ranked 78. And I don't know what the period of growth is here because they don't tell you the scale. So you just have to guess. All right, Wes, you ready? And Brent, if you have a guess too, you are welcome to chime in because I know I teased you in the pre-show. Can you guess the growth percentage for whatever it is? I don't know, a year since they started. I don't know because Forbes doesn't say. So it's who cares, but it's just for fun. Can you guess the growth percentage of Linux Academy as listed on the Forbes top 5,000 fastest growing companies?
200%.
200% is pretty good. That's pretty good. That is pretty bold. That is pretty bold. Does anybody in the mumble room? Brent, do you have a guess? What's your guess on Linux Academy's growth number?
Well, they're on the list of total how many?
This is Forbes' 5,000 fastest growing companies in America, and they're number 78 on the list. What do you think their growth percentage has been? For whatever the arbitrary amount of time is.
I'm going to go, they're number 78, so I'm going to go 178.
Oh, okay. So Wes is 200-something, 178. Wimpy, do you have a guess? Eric, do you have a guess what Linux Academy's number is?
It's 250%.
250? All right. This is like Price is Right here. What do you think, Wimpy?
For 300%.
Those are all really good, bold guesses. Probably not even, I wouldn't have gone that high. The official Forbes Inc. 500 fastest growing companies in America growth percentage is 4,653.64%.
Whoa, what?
And I actually think that's based on a low guess of what the revenue is. But that's pretty amazing. That is pretty amazing. 4,000%. And they're teaching about Linux. There's a reason why they're growing like crazy. Because let's be honest, one of the hardest things about the IT industry is the fact that it's changing faster than just about any other industry in the world. It's sort of the deal with the devil we all accepted when we got into IT. We all knew that was the case. And Linux Academy is kind of the tool to help keep you current. It's really due diligence when you're in IT, is keeping your skill set fresh. And I think that's why they're growing like crazy, is when you look at the explosion of cloud-based services like Azure and OpenStack and AWS and people that are rolling in their on-premises infrastructure and how everything is based around Linux, it makes sense. They are the go-to platform. So go there, linuxacademy.com/unplugged, sign up for a free 7-day trial. And the upshot of that is they look good on the resume now. You know, that's like a recognizable brand name now. You went to Linux Academy. Oh, I've heard of them. Yeah, they're on Forbes' list. Like, that's good for Linux Academy. So congratulations to them for making the list, too. That's pretty great. And